2019 was an amazing year here at VinWiki, and we truly cannot thank all of you enough for all the different ways that you've supported us, whether it's watching the videos, downloading the app, supporting our sponsors, buying merchandise, just all the ways that you've joined the VinWiki family. We truly appreciate it, and we cannot thank you enough. But to celebrate 2019 and ring in everything that we hope 2020 to be, we decided to put together a top 10 car stories list from the past year. So most of these videos already have over 1 million views. We hope you've already enjoyed them, but to celebrate and to give us a countdown to ring in everything at midnight, these are our top 10 videos from 2019.
I would say that I'm a motorsport fan more than I am a car fan. My love for anything with an engine came really from F1 and motorsport. So growing up, that's all I wanted to be. I wanted to be an F1 driver. I wanted to be an F1 champion. But I ran out of skill and money. I like to blame money, but it was more realistically skill. So that never really happened for me. But I've always been looking for ways to be involved with that sport somehow. And so when I left school, I went to like all the F1 teams, so many of them are based in the UK, and I was like, just give me a job, any job. You can't really do that apparently. You have to have skills or be trained in something. And I was like, I'll just sweep the garage floor. And so that didn't work out, so I went down a different path in life, but eventually ended up working in sort of publicity and PR, mainly for large events. And so that ended up being a few F1 sponsor events. So I started to sort of get involved here and there. And again, I was like, I've got to somehow get involved with F1. I love this sport so much. And, you know, I genuinely, since 1996, I think I've watched every single F1 race to date. Fine, I might skip a few because of things that are going on, but I watched the full rerun. So I really am that obsessed. And eventually I quit my job just before YouTube and set up a little PR publicity consultancy. And my whole aim was to only do F1 sponsors or F1 related clients. And I got a handful, but it was all a bit of a disaster. And, you know, so that led to me eventually starting my YouTube channel as a hobby, as a way to distract myself from my disastrous career move. Anyway, YouTube has somehow allowed me to get closer to F1 than I could have ever dreamt. And that came to a head last year when I ended up actually driving an F1 car. So this was part of a big campaign I was working on with Infinity, who are a sponsor of the Renault F1 team. And part of the campaign was a customer activation event where they take you to the French Grand Prix circuit and let you drive a 2012 Formula One car. Now, there are plenty of places you can go in the world that you can drive a Formula One car. And it's often the shell of a car with a Ford Mustang engine, or it's an old 1980s F1 car with 4 gears instead of 6. And, you know, they're not real experiences. This is as close as a normal human being could ever get to driving an F1 car without actually driving an F1 car. So it's run by the official Formula One team. You go there, you have to go through various bits of training. The car is running 15,000 RPM instead of 18,000 RPM and 6 gears instead of 7. And it has ABS and traction control. Those are in place because some of the people that get to do this event can literally be people that have never driven anything except their Infiniti Q whatever. So they have to put some safety parameters in place. But what I love is that they can dial in and dial out those, you know, sort of controls depending on the driver's ability. So throughout the day, you build up to this experience by driving other single-seater open-wheel cars. You also do some laps in some, you know, ordinary road cars, even in a van. And they sort of judge you. And so when you get into the F1 car, they go, okay, this guy doesn't need any traction control, or this guy needs all the traction control. But as I say, it would probably arguably be 75 or 80% of the real deal. And for me, for sure, is the closest I'm ever getting to driving an F1 car, especially given my height. You don't get many 6'2" Formula One drivers, so I had to really wave goodbye to that dream a long time ago. So I was so nervous, but so excited because, as I say, this has been a dream of mine since I was 5 or 6 years old, and something which I probably thought was never actually going to happen. So I go down to France, I got the whole day. The morning is arguably the best part of the day because you get put in something called a Formula 4 car, which is a junior series, a feeder series, like Indy Lights, but turned down even further. But the cars are super fun. You're in them by yourself. You get 2 30-minute sessions. You're racing against a clock. You're not really supposed to be racing other people on track, but inevitably you do. And you're on a Formula One circuit, so you are going all out. And I'm there like, back into my karting zone, like I was meant to do this, but really getting into it. And then after lunch is your F1 drive. Now you have to be clear, it's 3 laps. So the main reason they do this is that after 3 laps, people tend to get cocky or too confident and start driving recklessly. But also, physically, very few people can withstand the G-forces post 3 laps. And I have to explain this because I, as a fan, understand that F1 drivers are athletes. Most people tend to knock this and go, what do you mean they just sit there and drive a car? It's nothing about it. But you have to realize that they are going through 4 to 5G every single corner, on their body, on their neck, on their arms, because the cornering speeds are so high and the braking forces are so extreme. So I knew going into the experience, the things that were going to blow me away were the acceleration, no doubt. It's a car that does 0 to 100 miles an hour in 2 seconds or 2.5 seconds. Potentially the cornering speeds, although would I really experience downforce? Because that kind of break between mechanical grip and aerodynamic grip is so slim and so far. You've got to be going like 120 miles an hour plus before you're starting to see the aerodynamics. And then the braking. A lot of people have said to me, the braking is what will blow you away. And anyone who hasn't driven a race car before might not know that usually the brake pedal in a race car is like a brick wall. It's like the firmest pedal you've ever experienced in your life, and you have to stamp on it to get any kind of like movement. So you get put into the F1 car, they sit you down in the seat, and you actually lie down in a Formula One car. So your feet are up here, your hands, your steering wheel's right in front of your face, and you can kind of barely see over. You just see the tops of the tires, and you're kind of lying down. It is quite comfortable, but a little claustrophobic. Your feet are in stirrups so that you can't cross on the pedal, so your left foot braking. And before you're allowed out on the track, they say, okay, can you push the brake pedal for you? So, and I'm ready, and I push it pretty hard, and they're like, no, harder, harder. And I'm pushing it like harder to the point where I'm like pushing myself back into the seat. I can hardly breathe. And they're like, okay, that's 75% brake pressure. You got to hit that for every corner or the brakes won't work. And I'm like, oh no, I can't do that. They're like, you'll be fine. I'm like, no, what? So in my head, I'm like, oh, this is just so terrifying. And the emotions of the experience, everything about it is just so overwhelming that I'm not really taking the moment in. So by the time you actually get in to drive the car and you're belted in, they start up the engine and they push you out to the pit lane because it's too hard to engage the clutch. And you roll away and you're very smooth. You have to just let the clutch out real slow and then the car starts to trickle forward. Not like F1 drivers, they obviously help you with that, but off you go. And of course, the initial reaction is the acceleration. Barbaric. I mean, like nothing you've ever experienced before. Take the fastest road car you've ever been, and I'm talking about people who've driven LaFerraris or McLaren Sennas or whatever you might think. Formula One is faster. And the biggest thing is it's endless. I always feel like in a road car, there is an acceleration curve, no matter how fast you're in. Even in a Koenigsegg or Pagani, after that initial gut-wrenching acceleration, it smooths off. In Formula One, that doesn't give up. You know, the G-force is constant and your stomach is 3 miles down the road until you hit the brakes. But I'm kind of expecting that because it's Formula One, right? So I floor the accelerator and I'm like, oh my God. And you know, your head's banging around like this. And then I get to the corner and I arguably am not doing that fast at that first corner. So I turn in and it's unbelievably smooth and easy. Actually a lot easier to drive than the little Formula 4 cars because of the mechanical grip. The mechanical grip is so high that it's just, I'm like, oh, I am so good at this. I'm like, I am so good at this. Flowing through the corners, the back's not stepping out. I see the straight and I'm like, here we go. This is it. So I just go all the way down to second gear and floor it. And it's the most amazing experience. It feels like being strapped to a rocket ship. And I get to the end and all I remember is these sort of voices inside my head going, use the brakes. You know, like all the people that I've texted beforehand or my racing driver friends or people that I know just saying, what should I do? They're saying, use the brakes. So I'm hurtling towards this first corner. And in the Formula 4 car, I was braking at the 200 meter mark. And I look down and I see the 50 meter mark and I'm like, let's go for it. You know, what's the worst that's going to happen? There's a big runoff. If I die in Formula One, you know, the way I wanted to go. So I just go and I'm doing this and I see the 50 meters and I push the brake as hard as I can do it, my head like this. The G-forces takes my helmet and everything down into the cockpit. I can't see a thing. I'm like, trying to shift down gears. By the time I can finally lift my head up, the corner's there. So I'm like, turn into the corner. The whole thing goes like this. I'm like, absolutely, like, as I say, I've never experienced anything like that, and I won't ever again. And I finally get back to the pit lane, and I get out, and the guy goes, "Oh, you did a great job. You hit 40% brake pressure. Well done." 40%? He goes, "Yeah, that's pretty good for a first timer." And I'm like, how is that 40% if the real drivers are hitting 100% every time? And it wasn't just the fact that I applied as much leg pressure as I could. Like, I stamped on that pedal so hard. But it was the forces my body went through. My lungs were like at the front wheels. As I said, my head was in a not a nice place to be. All of it was so overwhelming that my respect for F1 drivers just went through the roof. Not only their physical ability, but the mental capacity to be able to do all of that and be fighting and looking where the opposition are and speaking to your team and switching controls. It was a completely sort of a recalibration of what a car could do. And the funny thing is that the team that run the cars on the day say the thing that people struggle with the most with an F1 car is actually how high the idle point is. The engine's idle at around 9,000 RPM. And as I say, usually they shift at around 18,000 RPM. So you're always at, that's like forever. You roll out of the pitch, you're like, and people can't get used to it. So they let the revs drop too low or they shift too early because your ears just aren't used to that higher pitch. And all the fluids and everything don't pass through the engine or they get cold and everything dries up. And I actually experienced this. I was the only person on the whole day to suffer any kind of issue. Okay, I didn't crash, but I did have a mechanical issue. Because obviously this whole use the brakes. Before I got onto the main straightaway, I was trying to see what these brakes would do. So I was in second gear, trundling around a corner. And I thought, I better stamp on the brakes and see what happens. So there I go, I stamp on the brakes and everything just went vroom. And all the revs dropped and I was in the wrong gear and the anti-stall kicked in. So I'm there, my first ever F1 experience, and the car just cuts out. And you have no car to pit radio. They can speak to you, but you can't speak to them. So I'm just free rolling, literally around this last corner, and I see the pit lane, and I have to roll, thank God I had enough speed, back into the pits. And everyone's sitting there going, "What's this guy doing?" And I'm like, "I think I broke it." So the only guy the whole day that screwed up the program, given that I was the person most excited and probably should have known that was something you shouldn't do. But you just have to keep the revs up. You have to keep the energy and everything moving, the temperatures up. It's an amazing machine in the fact that the only way to drive it is flat out the minute you leave the pit lane. There's no warm-up procedure, there's nothing. They've done that for you already with machines and computers. So the minute you leave that pit lane, you got to be on it, or the car is just going to give up on you. And that was a lesson to learn.
So I can't say that my first day selling cars was quite as successful as Rabbit's, but I did sell a car on my first day. It wasn't anything terribly exotic. It was a BMW 650 convertible. It took a few more days for me to sell my first Lamborghini, and even though that was a stick mercy, it wasn't exactly the kind of car that you were super proud to be representing. It had giant Forgiato wheels and this huge aftermarket wing and a bunch of other stuff on it. Just not the nicest example and not what you're just super proud to sell. But a few days after that, I sold kind of our first, core product. It was a 2009 Gallardo LP560, a matte white car, one of two that they brought into the US that year. Bianco Cannabis, Lamborghini called it. A big sticker car, super awesome. And I actually sold it to an NBA veteran. He'd played over 10 years in the league and wasn't really like a household name, but sort of a player to be named later in a whole bunch of trades, played for a bunch of different teams and made the league minimum for a lot of years, millions of dollars playing basketball. Super cool. So it was an awesome deal. I was really happy to sell him that car. He came in and loved it and, drove it away that day. And that night, my wife and I went out to celebrate, and he actually drove right past us on our way to dinner. And I flagged him down around and said, hey man, awesome, I'm glad you're enjoying the car. And he was over the moon, just absolutely loving it. And the next day was my day off, and I was kind of early enough in my car sales career that I thought you actually took your days off. I mean, generally you work 1 or 2 days on the weekend, so one of the weekdays you'll have is your day off, but generally you don't take it. And the reason for that is what happened the day I went back to work. I walk into the showroom and the car's right there. And so I'm like, guys, what happened? He said, well, he came back yesterday and fell out of love with the color and wanted this Grigio Telesto brand new car that we had. And so we sold it to him and took this back in on trade. And obviously I got no credit for the deal, didn't make anything on it. You know, it's just a miserable dog eat dog world that you got to learn some ways. And so I was a little bit upset about that, but I maintained the relationship with the client. And actually a couple of months later, I sold him another car. I sold him a BMW M6. He traded in his daily driver CL63 at the time. And it took a long time to do the deal, and actually he brought in this English Bulldog puppy that he said he'd bought the day before and flown in from Germany. It was like $5,000 dog, and the dog was obviously not housebroken. It was peeing all over the showroom, and he didn't really seem bothered by this, so I had a porter that had to follow the dog around cleaning up after it while we negotiated this car deal. And I guess that was the first urine bandit to hit Motor Cars of Georgia. So he ends up buying this car, and it just takes forever, probably an hour, 2 hours after we should have closed. We finally get everything worked out, and he and the dog in the car leave. And he had said at the time that he wasn't just loving the Lamborghini, he kind of wanted something a little bit more comfortable, and we had just gotten the Aston Martin franchise. And as a dealership, when you get a new franchise, the manufacturer just floods you with inventory. So we probably had 25 new but aging Aston Martins that were strange color combinations or, you know, bad options or high stickers and really hard to sell. And we were trying to sell through them, and the manufacturer was just leaning on us to hit numbers each quarter. And so around the end of June in 2010, we had this DBS Volante, and it was a quantum silver over Tuscan tan car. And Tuscan tan is kind of Aston Martin speak for Grey Poupon mustard yellow. It's kind of a strange color, but quantum silver is gorgeous. Obviously, it's a color from Quantum of Solace, the Bond movie. Even though Casino Royale and Quantum of Solace are scripted to be moment-to-moment sequential, the color of the car actually changes between the films. And so Quantum's a great color, and he had seen that car a couple of times, and I called him and I said, hey, why don't you bring the guy up? Let's see if we can work out some sort of a trade deal. And so he does, and we go back and forth for a long time. He just loved to drag negotiations out and seem really hard and like he was trying to make us work harder, but eventually we'd get him to wherever we needed to be. Sometimes it just took a really long time. And so, as usual, this was a Friday. It just drug on and on. After we should have closed at 7, we probably finished at about 8:30. And of course, he didn't bring the title to the Lamborghini, and he can't go authorize a wire transfer or get a certified check. So he says, Ed, will y'all take a personal check for this thing? And I'm like, well, it's not my call, but I'll certainly go ask. So I go ask my general manager. I said, hey, obviously, you know, he didn't bring the title, but he wants the car. Do you want to take a personal check for the difference? And he said, sure. I mean, this guy's an NBA player, made a lot of money. He's bought a bunch of cars. I mean, I can't imagine anything will go wrong. So, you know, back then we wrote temp tags and on these iridescent strips, handwritten on these paper tags. So I put one on the car, and about 8:30, he leaves on Friday night. So the next day, Saturday morning, I get in the office and I shoot him a text. I know he doesn't wake up until 12 or 1. And I say, hey, you know, let me know if you want me to send somebody down to grab that title, or if you're going to bring it in, you know, how we can help. And I hope you're loving the DBS. And we get carried away with selling cars that day, and I don't hear anything back. And so as we leave, my boss is like, all right, just make sure you get it on Monday. We'll get it all sorted out. So Monday I get in, I call him, and I don't get an answer. And we deposit the check and, you know, just assume that at some point he's going to bring this title. But nothing to get too freaked out about at that point. But later that day he calls me back and he says, hey Ed, I'm sorry, I had to run out of town for a few days. I'll be back like Wednesday, Thursday, and I'll bring you that title. I said, well, that's not what you said. He said, yeah, I'm sorry. I had to go. Sorry about that. And so I tell my boss, and I'm like, I don't know what we can do. I mean, I don't know how else we're going to get the title. He said, all right, well, we'll just see when he gets back. So a few days later, we get a call from our bank, and they say that the check had bounced. Insufficient funds. And I'm still trying to get in touch with him. He hadn't brought the title, and at this point, he's, you know, not answering. And while he says he's out of town, we keep seeing the car pop up on a website called Chasing Exotics. And Chasing Exotics was a website that Doug DeMuro started and used to run before he became an automotive journalist. And it was an exotic car spotting website, mostly in Atlanta and Hong Kong, of all places, but a pretty interesting thing. And so we saw the car showing up around Atlanta, so we knew he was in town and driving it. And so I keep trying to call him, ask him what's going on, and we get nothing back. And so finally I get in touch with him. He's like, oh man, I'm sorry. I deposited some money. I thought it would hit. I'm sorry that didn't clear. I'll send a wire or, you know, bring you a check tomorrow. Tomorrow comes and he doesn't show up, doesn't answer. And so after a few days, my boss steps in and calls him and goes from 0 to high order insanity immediately. And it's like, you stole this car. I'm going to send the police after you. I've got repo men looking for it. You're going to jail, all this craziness. And obviously the guy just shuts down, stops answering the phone, and won't talk to my GM anymore. I'm like, oh goodness, what are we going to do here? And so I kind of try to play the good guy. Obviously Aston Martin hostage negotiation is not something you sign up for, but in these situations where there's nothing really I can do to make it any worse, but there is a chance that I could help lead to a better outcome, it's the perfect opportunity to kind of show that you're a team player and that you can do things beyond the normal skill set that would be expected of somebody in your position. And so I keep talking to him and trying to offer different options, like, do you want to find a cheaper Aston or finance the difference? I mean, what can we do to help? Because obviously I knew he had the title to the Lambo somewhere, but he just was clearly not ready to proceed with the deal. And it just drags on, and we're not getting much help from the cops, and the repo men can't really get into the community because it's gated, and we're not exactly sure where he's at. And so we're just kind of at a stalemate for days, turning into weeks and going over a month. And so after about 35, 40 days, his temp tag's expired. He can't drive the car anymore. He's not responding to my GM, but occasionally I'll get something back from him. And finally I get him to say, hey, you can come meet me for dinner and we'll talk about this. So I asked my general manager, I'm like, what do you want me to do? I mean, I don't know what to negotiate with this guy on. He said, well, we're not having any luck with the cops or anything else. And this was a lot like some of the stolen rental car situations where it's really more of a civil matter and you know who has it. So it's not like a all points bulletin, be on the lookout sort of thing. So there's not much help they offer with multiple jurisdictions being involved. And he's like, all right, well, just go to dinner, see what you can figure out. So I show up and it's this guy and his entourage, and he's like, man, I don't know. I thought I had this money coming in. I'm sorry. I don't know what to do now. I drove the car a little bit. I think I just want you to give me the money that you were going to give me on trade for the Gallardo, and then I'll just give you the Aston Martin back. And I'm like, well, problem with that is an over allowance. And sometimes when somebody won't take what their trade's really worth, you pretend to give them more and you just don't discount the other side as much as you really are. And so where the car might have been worth 150, 160 grand, we probably showed him 180 or 90. And so he thought his car was worth a lot more. And I had to tell him, well, if we take the profit of this car out of the deal, we have to give you what your car is really worth. And I don't know if they still want your car, but I'll try. He's like, all right, well, if you can get them to write me a check for that, I understand what it's really worth, then I'll give you the Aston Martin back and give you the title. So the next morning I go back into the office and I'm like, all right, this is what he agreed to. And they're like, no, I'm not buying that car. I don't want to see it anymore. I'm not doing anything else with this guy. I'm like, well, that's fine. I don't know what else to offer. I just believe he will perform to this agreement because he said it and it's right now for us to go and do. And finally, like, all right, just whatever. It's the only hope we have to get this car back amicably or reasonably amicably. Go get it. I went down with a porter. He drove me down so I could drive the DBS back. I got the title of the Lamborghini. He signed it. I got the DBS. Fortunately, it was no real worse for wear. I think he'd driven it 350, 400 miles. Nothing too terrible. I think he curbed a wheel or two, but again, nothing that can't be easily fixed. So fortunately, it's kind of resolved. I take the car back, we re-PDI it and get it listed for sale again. And we never heard from this customer anymore, unfortunately, but we sold his Gallardo to a really good customer up in Tennessee, and he owned a bunch of interesting cars and loved it. It was a really good deal on a barely used Gallardo LP560. And we kept the DBS and, we got more incentives back from Aston, but it wasn't really eligible for those because we'd had to punch it when we thought we had it sold because they were leaning on us to sell more units that quarter, and we thought it was sold, and it took several days for the check to bounce. And so we weren't eligible for the greater rebates and incentives that came down the road. It sat around for another 7 months, and actually the same guy that bought the Gallardo ended up buying the DBS for his wife. And they'd had other DBSs in every awesome car, and he loved it. Drove it for a little while and actually found out that in 2016, the car got exported to the Netherlands. That's one of the things we love about VinWiki, is the chance to kind of see what happens to cars kind of after they fall out of touch or you don't know where they've ended up. And sometimes those days where you learn the most about the car business are not the best financially. The little commission they'd paid me on the not terribly profitable deal where we'd sold this DBS in the first place got charged back, and I never got any thank you or anything for having recovered it. But on those days where you don't get the recognition or the praise that you think you might deserve, at least you end up with a really good story to show for it. And honestly, what more could you ask for?
I went to the dealership with my mom, who wanted to buy a convertible BMW. She had several convertible Saabs prior, a 9.3 and a 900 turbo, and one was red, one was yellow, and she loved them so much, but they had stopped making them. So she wanted a convertible car, and she wanted a soft top. And I had said to her, you really don't want a soft top, especially in Minnesota. You want a hard top, because over time, those soft tops tend to deteriorate and you get wind noise and, leaks and that sort of thing. If you're going to keep this car for a long time, which my mom does, that you're going to want to have something that's going to last a long time. So why not look at the new BMW 3 Series that has the foldable hard top, that convertible, the kind of thing that would go into the trunk. And she's like, no, it's got to be a soft top. I said, Mom, just go look. Have a, whatever. So we go there and we get to this sales guy, and he's this short, stocky, very macho sales guy. And I'm not really saying much. And my mom is kind of talking to the guy, and I'm, whatever, not really paying much attention. And she's really adamant that there's a soft top, and they're trying to explain to him that they stopped selling the soft top a number of years ago, and it's only hard tops now. And she's very adamant she's got to have this soft top, and well, they can't find one. Well, sure enough, this is Minnesota in the winter. They have a BMW Z4 M Series sitting on the showroom floor. And it's this special blue color, like this pale, shimmery blue color. And it's the M Series, and they were talking about how amazing this car is. They also had an F430 that was sitting there, and I was, kid in a candy store, like, wow, look at this thing, cool. And I'm looking at it and kind of oogling and eyeing and not really saying that I'm into cars or anything, but I'm just like, I'm admiring the artistry of the Ferrari and seeing how beautiful it is. And then look at the BMW and I'm going, it's a very pretty car. And that's when the conversation starts. Oh, well, how powerful these things are. Okay. Dude. My Camaro made 600 horse. My Viper made 550 to the wheels. My current Corvette makes 580 to the wheels. I've driven cars in excess of 1,000 horse. I'm sorry, this is not a fast car. And that's kind of when car guy mode kicks in, have some experience. I don't consider myself a great driver, but I consider myself competent and quick. I'm not fast, but I consider myself a quick driver. My SCCA autocross brain kind of kicks over and goes, what do you mean? How fast this thing is? It's not that fast. He goes, oh, you clearly haven't taken it for a test drive. I said, I'm not really interested, but I doubt it's that fast. And he goes, oh, no, it's got the, the M-Power motor in it, inline 6. Oh, neat. Good for you. And he goes, why don't you take it for a spin and I'll show you what it's all about. I said, okay. He says, you can drive stick. I said, sure. From the showroom, they open both the doors for me. We drive it out, and it's winter in Minnesota, and so there's slush and snow and ice. And we're driving it around, and I get up to temperature, and this really stocky, just, I'm going to tell you about cars sort of sales guy is there. And he's in the passenger seat. He's like, all right, the car's warmed up. Why don't you see what kind of power this thing gives you? Okay, it's all right. He's like, yeah, didn't you feel that? It's all right. 300 horse, give or take? He's like, well, yeah, it's about that. I said, okay. He goes, oh, no, okay. Well, clearly I'm not impressed by this. So he says, well, why don't you take a few corners? See how it corners. Okay. Again, former autocross experience. I'm going to go late brake into one of these turns around a corner, give it kind of a quick little flick, try to get the back end to come around a little bit, and I'm noticing that the back end's not coming out around. And I do this 2 or 3 turns in a row, and I'm noticing that it's not wanting to flick. And mind you, this is Minnesota. It's icy, there's snow on the ground, and it's wet. Why is the car not wanting to jerk the back end around? I am trying everything I know how. I'm trying to, give it the left-right flick. I'm giving it the throttle flick. I can't get it to do it. And I said, yeah, it might handle all right, but it's just way too tight. You can't get the back end to go. And he goes, man, you're not really driving it. And at this point, I'm not driving it as hard as I possibly could be. And he says, no, man, go, just, go for it. All right, he's been egging me on for long enough. Forget it. I go into 10/10 mode. I hit one turn where it kind of came up to a T and I was gonna make a right. I could see half a mile, no traffic. I said, perfect. I barrel into this as fast as I think I can humanly take this. Slam on the brake as hard as I can. Turn the wheel, still braking so that the back end will come out a bit, downshift, floor it, and that's when finally the ass end kicks out. It was a beautiful power slide through the snow and the mush and the gook and all this stuff. And I'm got my foot in it and I'm kind of coming around the turn and I straighten it out and I go, yeah, you're right, that was way better. And he goes, get out, we're done. Why? You told me to do that. He goes, no, we're done. You can't, we're drive back to the dealership right now. Yes, sir, no problem. Put it into third gear, fourth gear, driving it real patient, real slow. He storms into the dealership. I park it outside, we didn't drive it back in because it's got mush all over it now. I got to go get it detailed. And he walks up to my mom and in full view of my mom and a bunch of other salespeople, he is not allowed to drive any more cars, period. Are you gonna buy something or not? And that's when my mom says, I don't think so. And he says, fine, you can't come back here. I don't ever want to see you back here again. And in my mind, I'm thinking, I wonder how long you're going to be a salesman here. Because probably not very long. So my mom did not buy a BMW from him. She ended up buying a BMW from someone else who I did not test drive their car either. But yes, I was banned from driving at that BMW dealership, at least from that one particular salesman.
There's an event called Streetcar Takeover. It's kind of like our Texas 2K here in Atlanta. You know, we do roll racing at the drag strip. They do grip racing, dig racing, all that stuff. I'm walking around and I see 1320 is there. I'm like, everybody knows them. They're the guys for street racing. So I'm like, okay, how can I incorporate my shop into their videos? So I reach out to Kyle. Kyle is the owner of the company. I was like, hey, you want me to throw together some racing tonight? He's like, yeah, that's great. Gave me his number. So I spent the rest of the day walking around trying to find people that want to run. I said, hey, 1320's in town. Do you want to be on video? And what's interesting about 1320 filming you racing is people don't care if they race for money. We didn't race for a penny the entire night. So I get all this interest because people just want to have their car on the video. That's all they want to do, because they get ridiculous amounts of views. So everybody's putting their Instagram name on their cars and whatnot now. And I get about 20 cars together. We're planning on running from about 11 p.m. to about 2 or 3 a.m. That's usually the window of where there's a shift change. I don't know that for a fact, but there's a lot less cars in the area between 11 and 3 than there usually is between 3 and 6 a.m. or beforehand. We get everything paired up, and I'm thinking to myself, I'm listening, I got a bunch of buddies there, a bunch of friends helping me with the shop. We're just keeping it super, super quiet. Well, we hear a car coming, and then we hear another car coming, and then we hear another car coming. We walk around the building, and I look, and I'm like, oh, there's a Mustang pulling it. Okay, well, maybe it's some kind of crazy horsepower. No, it's a V6 Mustang with some Flowmasters on it, just a real turd box. And we're like, hey, can we help you? They're like, oh yeah, we're here for the street racing. And I was like, are you racing this thing? And he's like, no, we're gonna hang out. I said, first of all, how did you hear about this? He says, oh, my buddy in there told me about it. He told me I could bring some friends. So one of the guys that has a CTSV, it's a coupe, it's a black one. He had told a buddy that he was gonna be street racing on 1320 and to come out and bring a buddy. That means maybe bring one car with a couple buddies in it, not bring your buddies' cars. So we're like, okay, let him in, don't say anything. One of the guys in the group was Facebook Living what we were doing and checked in at my shop. It took a lot to not shove this kid in the dumpster, but we didn't. We left him alone. An hour passes by and we're really nervous, okay? I said, don't film. Nobody needs to know where this is at. You can film this and post it later. Nobody needs to know what's going on right now because it's going to destroy our quiet session of racing, which is crazy to say. I hear more cars coming down the hill. We walk around the building. It had to have been all of Mustang Atlanta. The entire group of Mustang. It was a row of Mustangs up the hill so far I couldn't see the last car. This is not open to the public. This is not something for you and your buddies to come hang out at. This is not something for you to Facebook Live and show your friends that you're cool because you're hanging out with people that are street racing. It doesn't work like that. I had to call in some friends, and we're basically blocked off the driveway. We put our truck right there. In the bottom there's a cul-de-sac down there, so they all congregate down there. We block it off, and it's on a first name basis. If you're coming up there saying that you were invited, it's either my name or my friend's name. If you don't say either of those names, like, oh, Mark or this or that, like, nah, you gotta go. Next, sorry. Because we invited a couple more cars, so we didn't know if they were coming or whatnot. So we had some big time ballers coming out. We had a local friend of mine, Boris, owns a shop here. He brought out a 458 Speciale, and he also brought out a 996 GT2, I believe, like an older school one, twin turbo car. Meanwhile, the Mustangs are hanging out in the cul-de-sac. All the cool cars are there. We're set up. We're filming. We hear some revving in the cul-de-sac. The guys that didn't get into the exclusive race event that we were holding were obviously upset. They wanted to be part of it. And so they decided to just do burnouts and do pulls up the road as they were leaving. And mind you, this is probably a good solid 12 cars that were very loud. So once they left, I take everybody and move them on the side of behind the building. Sure enough, Hall County Sheriff comes cruising down the hill, trying to look where all that noise is coming from. And sees burnout marks and all that stuff in the cul-de-sac. Sits down there for a second. Another one comes down there. You see the Crown Vics hanging out, cul-de-sac. So, in my mind, I'm like, this is kind of exciting. I'm hiding 23 really high-end, fast street racing cars on the other side of this building. And I'm literally like to the point of where I'm like, shh, shh, like, everybody be quiet. 15, 20 minutes passes by, they go up the hill, whatnot. So they get back to film. They film the interviews, they do this and that. Hey, what do you got down to this Corvette? Twin turbo Corvette here, Evo, 8 horsepower Evo here, GTR here, Ferrari here. Okay, cool. And everything is based around my business. My shop door is open, everything's good to go. I got my banner hanging up in the shop. They come in and they, people need to use some tools, whatever. So it was cool because I was able to incorporate my shop into the racing. That's great. But there's a lot of stress on me because I'm facilitating this whole deal, okay? So it's me and my buddy. We're like, all right, let's get down to brass tacks. What are we going to do? How are we going to do this? So, okay, the cops are gone. Let's pair up. There was multiple cars that want to run multiple people back to back. So if you have like two GTRs, the M3 is going to follow him. And when they race, he's going to race the winner of that. That's how we had it set up. I want to do this smart, and I want to make sure that I impress them so that they were willing to come back the following year in order to want to run at my area. So we send 4 cars out. And two races, they switch, and they literally ran 4 races total. So we ran 4 races, success, great. Everybody came back, nobody got arrested, and there was no cops in sight. We always ask, did you see anybody? Did you have any issues? No cops in sight, we're good to go. From my exit, we were able to go north or south and run, which is great. So we split it up. I'm thinking logistically, I'm like, okay, how can I fool them? So we just ran going south 4 times. Okay, so if there's any people at their houses or anybody heard anything, then they might report us, okay? Let's run north. So I pair up another 4 races. Then another hour goes by. Those guys run out, and they were able to do their races to come back. Success. No cops. Great films. Good racing. No issues. No car issues. And then I'm like, all right, let's chill for about 30 minutes to an hour. It is now 1 o'clock in the morning, and we have successfully done 8 races with no issues back to back. We're going to chill for about 30 minutes to an hour. I want to wait till about 2. So from about 1:25, 1:30 to 2 o'clock, we're just chilling, hanging out, pairing up another races. And I was like, okay, well, maybe we'll get some bets going. And then, no, let's just do fun runs. Everybody just wants to do fun runs. They want to be on camera. We go out at 2, I remember the time, it's 2:10 because I rode with the guy in the GTR. We go out, and it's just a pair up of 2. It's just the Corvette and the GTR, and we're paired up. And like I said, we're doing 60 to 160, fun run. The film crew's going, everything's exciting, everybody's hyped up. We run. Honk, 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 60 roll. Pass a Hall County Sheriff's officer. Okay, so he wasn't clocking. He was apparently broken down, or something was wrong with his car. There was a mechanical issue with his car, because when we passed him, he was pulled over with his lights on, not the police lights, like just regular running lights. We thought it was a regular car. So we passed him probably about 150, and I told him, I was like, we just passed a cop. Like, that white car was a cop car. It was a black, unmarked Crown Victoria. We get off at the next exit, we book it, we go wherever we need to go, back roads back to my shop, so we're not taking the highway back. So we get back to the shop, I was okay, we had an issue. We went south, we passed the cop, we were doing about 150. He clearly knew we were racing. We were the only two cars on the highway, we were both hauling. We regroup, and I'm thinking, okay, well, now it's about 3 o'clock in the morning. What are we going to do? We only have about 10 races in. I want to get a solid number. I want to make sure this is the last night they're in town. I want to make sure we get this right the first time. Well, we need to continue to run to produce more video. Let's run north. So I have a runner. One of my friends had a Ford Expedition. He's so into it. He's like, yeah, I'll jump in my truck. I'll head up north. I'll scout. We have our scout go out. So we have a scout. He goes north. He passes our exit, goes south. Both ways clear. No problem. Okay, cool. Maybe he got a toad or something like that. Not there. Pair up another race. It was a Supra, 1,000 horsepower Supra, and a Gixxer 1000 with, I think, a Sneaky Pete nitrous setup, probably a 50 or 100 shot. So good race, really good race. They go out and do their runs, come back. They're like, there's 2 cops at the bridge. And I was like, okay, this is, I'm getting in my professional mind. I'm like, all right, well, how can I fix this problem? Okay, let's try to run south. So now what we're doing is we're going down, hitting the next exit, and running on the way back so we can scout ourselves. So we send a scout, and we're also scouting ourselves while we're racing. When they're running on the way back, they tell me that they don't see any cop cars on the highway. But on top of the bridge, there's a guy standing up there with something reflective when they pass by. They're like, oh God, okay, now you get back, everything's still good. So we've just had, at this point, we're in about 5 hours of street racing. We're about probably 14 to 16 races in. They say that they don't know if they want to run anymore. So I'm like, okay, well, just have some faith in me. Let's figure this out. I'll send another scout out, go north again. No problems, no cars, whatnot. There's 2 GTRs that match up. There's a red GTR, another one. They're both low 1,000 horsepower cars. They run north. They said they ran 3 times coming back. Did 3 runs. And when they got off the exit, there was about 8 cars. From getting off the highway to my business park, can't be more than maybe 2 miles. They passed roughly 8 cars. Just sitting out. Unmarked cars, marked cars, just one of them was sitting here, one of them was sitting in the light, one of them was sitting here. So they knew we were running. They weren't stupid. And they were on to us. They knew we were on that exit because everything congregated around that exit, but they couldn't find us, which was very exciting in itself. One of them goes home, so he splits off, and the other guy goes down to the gas station. Because the problem is, if there's that many cop cars and there's 2 cars that come off the highway and you turn into the business park, they're going to know where we are. So the guy at the gas station called me and was like, hey, I passed like 8 cars. My buddy went home a completely different way. I want to get back over there, but I don't know what to do. Hurry and jump in the park and then haul in the park and hide behind the building. So that's what he does. He goes up the hill, jumps in the park. 2 cars pull out. They follow him into the park. He's able to get behind the building before they can see where he went. So at this point, we're hiding, hush, hush, shh, kind of deal. Me and my buddy Jonathan were thinking to ourselves, like, we did it. We had no mechanical failures of any cars. Everybody's happy. We got at least 12 to 14 runs on film. Good runs, solid runs. Nobody gapping anybody like crazy. Barely pulling everybody. Very, 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 very tense racing. And everybody leaves slow, one by one. We do about a minute gap in between each car. And then that way they don't follow anybody home or whatnot. Everybody leaves. Me and John, we look at ourselves. We're just like, serious high five on that one. The film crew was like, we can't thank you enough. Thank you for everything. We got good footage. So we lock up the shop. Me and him leave. We get in our cars. This is what's crazy about the entire story. Leave out of my shop. 3 cars in the cul-de-sac. All unmarked cars. Top of the hill. There's a Sobe on the right there on the corner when you get on the Friendship right there. 2 cars in that parking lot. Go down. You got to go down and do a U-turn to go back up towards Hamilton Mill where I live. Another car sitting at the U-turn. Do our U-turn. Go up. There's a Montessori school right there on the right. Cop car sitting in the Montessori school. 2 blocks up, there's a Zaxby's. 1 sitting in the Zaxby's. 1 sitting in the Shell. Go across 995. There's a Harley Davidson dealership right there on the left right there on the Friendship Road. 2 cars sitting in there. Go up, there's a little school right there on the right before you get to Ridge Road, and there's a car sitting there. Get to the light, another car sitting there. Could not find us. I called my friend John. I was like, Jonathan Ramirez, we have successfully done 8 hours of street racing and did not get caught. I felt like I had accomplished something just absolutely phenomenal. To organize and run illegal street racing for 8 hours and nobody get caught, I'm very proud of myself for that.
Over the years, I've helped build a lot of cars. And when I say help build them, I've been a parts liaison. With my accent, it opens up doors and allows me to obtain stuff, you know, maybe a little bit easier than an American guy that they hear every other day. They hear a new voice on the phone, they get a little bit excited, they think I'm someone special, doors start opening, and there you go, you know. Over the years, people have kind of gone, Sam, so you get parts and you help out at the end of builds, but do you actually build anything yourself? You can't build a car, you know. You're in England, man. You don't know nothing about the hot rodding world or custom car building. And, you know, when people say that, it's true. You know what? It's hard to hear it, but it's the truth, you know. You start thinking, oh, man, I built this car, you know, or I've been a part of a team that built this car. And then you start sitting back and going, actually, what have I done? I've helped out a lot with charity, gaining parts, you know, and saving money on the, you know, the down cost of the build. And I've helped put parts in cars that I've owned. And I've helped the snag list, you know, the SEMA crunch list. I've helped with that too, but I physically haven't built anything for the US or the UK. So I got a phone call from one of my buddies who is a stunt driver on Fast and Furious Live. The best way to describe this without upsetting too many people: it was designed for car people, but wasn't designed by car people. The company went bust. Fast and Furious Live went bust. And I got a phone call saying, there's a private auction coming up. Are you interested in buying any of the cars? I can get you in. I was like, cool. So I sold my 1960 Cadillac Coupe de Ville, like hot chocolate, Detroit steel wheels on air. Like, it was bad for an English guy to have. Sold that, and I sold my 1970 Dodge Charger that was kind of mine and my dad's. And I had a little bit of money in the bank. And I went on this online auction, and I'm clicking away thinking, I might have an opportunity to buy one of these cars. You know, they're like my iconic dream cars. And there was a real Dennis McCarthy Dodge Charger that I think went for like $80,000. So there you go, my first dream car, boom, gone. I got no chance. I tried buying some other cars. There's like these little Hayabusa powered buggies that were really cool, and they went crazy as well. So everyone knows Paul Walker's green Mitsubishi Eclipse from the first movie. And I'm looking at it going, nah, that's cool. This is electric powered. Wasn't designed to do 50, 60 mile an hour. It was designed to do 10 miles an hour. These hubcaps would spin to replicate the car was moving, and the road, which was projected on the floor by big projectors, moved behind the car to make it look like it was going fast. And I click on it, £5,000 English, click. 10, 9, 8. Freaking won a car that is like one of the most iconic movie cars in like car history for my era. I won it, you know, and it's looks the part. I mean, the bodywork is phenomenal. It's green. It's got all the stickers in the right place. So this car was a replica built especially for the Fast and Furious Live production. So I carry on bidding. Then this other electric Dodge Charger comes up. And I'm like, well, it's a 1970 Dodge Charger body. Like, they're 20 grand just for a clean body. Like, why not? I'm bidding away. I'm like, £5,500, like $72,000. Boom, I won it. What's going on? Like, I won 2 of the most iconic movie cars in the world. At this point, there was no documentation backing it up. It's just a shell, it's just a prop. Once again, electric motors. You pressed a button, it went up on its back wheels, went along, smoke machines to hide all the wheelie bar equipment. But it's kind of cool. So I didn't just buy 2 cars at the auction, I bought a 3rd vehicle. After the auction had finished, there's one vehicle that didn't get a bid. It was the Oshkosh Dune truck used when they stole the Di Tommaso Pantera off the train in the train heist. It was basically a mock-up to look like the one in the movie. Once again, it wasn't a film-used vehicle. It had Jeep Cherokee axles that are like 6 feet wide, and the truck's 10 feet wide. Had these big fiberglass wheels that spun and moved up and down to make it look like it was going over the dunes. It had like a $50,000 hydraulic aluminum body that came off the back. So it was designed to take a vehicle off, but never designed to put a vehicle on. So I bought the Dune truck, and we turn up, and somehow I've got to get 3 cars back to Portsmouth, which is a good 4 hours away from where I live, with 1 recovery truck and 1 lorry. So I got the Dune truck on. I'm like, damn it, where am I going to put the Eclipse? So we load the Dodge Charger on. It's too heavy. The body won't lift it on. So we put the Eclipse on, and it lifts it on. We get the Eclipse on the back of the Dune truck, on the back of a lorry, take it back to the UK. So we're driving down the highway, or the motorway in England, as we call it, and I'm looking at the Dune truck on the left-hand side with the Eclipse on the back, and I'm like, my life has just changed here. This is like a turning point in my life, my career, my future. If I die tomorrow, it's done. I've done something pretty cool by buying stuff that I don't need with all the money that I do need, but that's fine. We're driving down the street, and some guy messages me on Facebook and says, hey, I used to work for Fast and Furious Live, and I'm pretty sure that the car you have is the Holy Grail. And I'm like, what do you mean? He says, well, I'm pretty sure there's a title showing that it was owned by Universal City Studios. And I'm like, nah, I don't think so. I think that was probably the Dennis McCarthy build that sold for like 80 grand. He's like, no, check your VIN. So we pull over at the gas station, and I start looking at the car, and I check the VIN number out, and I start going through the paperwork, and I've got a copy of the title that says Universal City Studios with my VIN number, black Dodge Charger. And I mean, does it get any more cool than a 1970 Dodge Charger that has been used on Fast and the Furious Live, that was owned by Universal Studios? Then I find a receipt showing that it went from Universal Studios to Visual Effects, who's owned by Dennis McCarthy, then sold to Fast and Furious Live. So now I've got documentation proving that my car was a movie-owned vehicle, which is freaking awesome for me, like life-changing, which therefore gives me the idea of moving forward and making something special out of it that's road legal and usable, because therefore I can apply for a title in England and I can drive this car on the road. When I bought the car, I just thought it was a shell. It was cool. It was like the most perfect Dodge Charger body that I could ever dream of owning. Mopars over the years, thanks to the movie franchise, have just gone up in the world. There's no way of you being able to afford one on a normal worker's pay, And to own this car for peanuts and now owe me nothing, I was kind of like in a good position. And people all around the world were like, man, just put engine and tranny in it, stop being a jack. Come on, you're going to ruin it. And I'm like, I don't know. And then as a car guy, when you can't do something. Like, it's quite simple. Like, it can or it can't be done. And even if it can be done, it's going to be done to a bad standard that's never going to have any resale value. My lovely lady's laid there in bed. She's like, why don't you do it yourself? I was like, what do you mean? She said, why don't you build a car for SEMA with your sponsors and do something that no one's done? I was like, okay, I'll do it. I met this great guy called Carl from Talk American, and he's a big Mopar guy, and he comes down to my shop, and he's also talking me out of this. He's like, you're a jack. You cannot cut up this Mopar because you're going to ruin your reputation as an American car guy in England. Everyone's going to think you're an asshole. I was like, well, they're probably right. To be fair, they are probably bang on the nail of what I'm thinking about doing. I'm looking for a drivetrain now. So I need something where I can get a chassis rails, or I can do something like Dodge Chargers are a monocoque. So they got the chassis rails built into the frame. And it's not something you can take the body off. Now, this NASCAR was on eBay, and I looked at it. It's like an Outflack 99 Carl Edwards NASCAR. And I'm like, before I even got the Charger, the guy had it out for 20 grand. I was like, that's cool. I want to own a NASCAR, but I can't afford it. I'm hard up, I'm looking at it, and I messaged the guy, I'll give you 10 grand. He's like, no. He comes down, 16 grand. 2 weeks go by. I'll give you 10 grand. He's like, 14 grand. I was like, no. Finally, I get it for 10 grand. I go pick it up, and I'm like a 16-year-old kid who's just got his first bicycle or whatever, and I am being an absolute I'm driving this NASCAR round like it is a go-kart. In England, you don't get the opportunity to drive like an idiot because there's no space to. I'm driving it around my estate, doing burnouts, doing donuts on slicks in a NASCAR. I'm like a kid in a candy store. I'm looking at it going, well, hang on, the rear end's like 20 grand, the brakes are 20 grand. People pay 250 grand to build these cars when they're new. Like, you ain't gonna get a better frame to put underneath a car, right? So I'm thinking, why don't I just put the NASCAR underneath the Charger? And you start looking into it and you think, oh, it's just a fiberglass body. We'll take the fiberglass body off. Turns out they're all steel, right? And they're freaking heavy. So, someone spent $250,000 making this thing perform and go around a circle, right? Turn left, turn left, turn left. Cool, let's get a rip saw. So I'm getting rips on. I'm cutting the body off. I get like it's $100 junker, you know. I'm cutting the body off. Cut the body off, take the body off as one piece. I sold that. They turned it into a bar. I'm left with the best ever suspension. Dale Earnhardt front suspension. It's got NASCAR emblems all over it. It's got in the tank the race, the year, the date, all scribbled out. That's how it works. What can I do with this car to make it usable? So then I start making an exoskeleton up for the Dodge Charger, and I lift the body off, cut all the floor out, and by this point, I've got a Dodge Charger, which in my head, the body was probably worth 20 grand. Now it's worth maybe a couple of grand just in parts like doors and fenders because I've messed it up to the point of no return. I roll the NASCAR underneath and probably should have checked this before I did it. But, you know, when you're excited about something, you just crack on and either way you got to make it happen. So hurdles get in the way. It's not how you make a problem, it's how you get over it. And I put the NASCAR underneath. Drop it down, roll cage is in the way. Cool, cut the roll cage out of the way. Drop it down, still doesn't fit. Cut more of the roll cage out of the way. Drop it down, cool, my wheelbase is out by 7 inches. You know, the distance between the front and the rear wheel is 7 inches different. I'm like, oh my God, what am I going to do? So I'm thinking of like moving the axle back, or I'm thinking about moving the front suspension forward. And in the end, I was like, well, hang on, I can just cut it in the middle, extend it 7 inches, extend the prop shaft, brake lines, all this kind of stuff, fuel lines, weld it back together. I work with this guy called Adam, who's a welder. Call him in. He's like, we're going to do this. We're going to cut the chassis in half, and we don't have a jig. We don't have any like expensive equipment, laser lines, or any of this stuff. We're doing this old school hot rod style. We're learning as we're going along, and we cut it in half. And he comes up with this idea of welding these small pieces of angle line and putting a piece of steel in, right? So that's our length. We know that both sides we have one bar only. We don't have two. We paint it a special color that we don't throw it away and we hang it up out the way. And we weld like two little pieces of angle bar and put this bar in. So that's our length at the moment. We then put that bar on the other side, do exactly the same. Then cut the car completely in half. So you can imagine how I'm feeling at this point. I've got a Dodge Charger that is not worth anything. I've got a NASCAR that's in probably 60 to 70 pieces that is not worth anything apart from all the parts. And I'm like, this is never, ever in my life going back together. Like I've never gone this far before, and now I've gone too far. We cut another piece of steel that's 7 inches longer. We put that in, we brace it up, we jig it all up, weld it all together, measure, check, everything. And it's perfect. Like, it's flawless. And we're like, cool, well, we're achieving something now. Then we start dropping the body down. I start making these inner seals so that they're so perfect that when you drop the Dodge Charger down, it glides on the chassis rails of the NASCAR so that it's a perfect seam fit. So even if you wanted to, you couldn't grab hold of the car and move it in any direction. It's a flawless fit. We use the original firewall for the NASCAR, everything in place. And it gets to the point, well, actually, it's starting to look pretty cool now. I've got these big Goodyear tires hanging out the front fenders. The wheelbase looks amazing. The wheels up inside the wheel arches just looks like something like Dave Kindig would do, you know? They're 27.5 inches tall. If you start working out, that's like a 22-inch rim with some like real low pros on it. You could go pro street with it. You could put some bad big 22s and make it look kind of pro street. And I was thinking, oh my God, this is looking good. I'm trying to get someone to build me a roll cage, yeah? I've never done a roll cage in my life, but I don't want to send it somewhere and pay someone $2,500 to make a roll cage. I want to get someone to come to my shop, bring a pipe bender, like a Mandarell bender, a Bailey one, bring me that, and we'll do it together. I want to learn. This car is going to be built by me, and I'll have help along the way because I ain't no genius, but I want to build it at my shop in my time with my hands. And in a day from 6 in the morning till 6 at night, we filmed every part of it, and we built this freaking badass roll cage. Drop it down, take it up, drop it down, pick it up. We dropped the body on, I welded it all on. I made the trunk all look OE to fit the original NASCAR chassis. I had sponsors from all around the world. I mean, Cobra Bucket Seats in the UK, they phoned me up and like, we hear you're building something pretty crazy. I was like, yeah. Well, would you consider putting our seats in it? I was like, yeah. Everyone's heard about Cobra Bucket Seats. I mean, they're built well, they're race approved. They must be doing something right to still be around. Then Schroff Racing, who work with Cobra, sent me these like 4-inch wide NASCAR 8-point harnesses, like over the top, but it just works. You start going through things, everything just falls together. You know, Mickey Thompson, I phoned him and was like, well, I need a tire I can drive across America in, but I want them 27.5 inches high, I want them 12 inches wide, I want them by 15. They're like, well, we do this, but they're 28 inches high, but they're a little bit narrower. And I was like, but the problem is, you can't really get cooler than Goodyear Eagle tires, right? But when they're like 3 mil thick NASCAR tires, you hit a stone or a nail, you're gonna have a blowout. especially on snow, you can't drive in slicks. So Mickey Thompson sent me these tires, and I basically contacted the head of marketing. And I said, I want the logos from 1968 to 72. And they sent them to a company called Tire Stickers, who made me up these NASCAR-esque bright yellow logos, which basically copy the fact of the NASCAR Eagle NASCAR tires, but now I'm on tires that can actually get me across America, and the whole thing is starting to come together. I've got the right wheels on it. I've got an audio system in it. Like, I can tell you who puts an audio system in a NASCAR. This chap. I think I must be the only man in the world that puts an audio system in a NASCAR. I met this guy who owns Speed Dog, DAWG, who make these custom bad gear shift balls, right? He said to me, Sam, if you ever want anything and you're bringing something to SEMA, just let me know. So I'm like, well, I got Dominic Torretto's Dodge Charger. I got it on Carl Edwards' NASCAR chassis. And Paul Walker's not with us anymore, right? So how can I do something in this car that is going to be kind of cool? So I contacted him. I said, I got this idea of a shifter ball, and I asked everyone, and everyone says my idea was stupid. So it just gave me more ammunition to move forward with my plan. I sent it to him, and I want to do 1, too fast, 3, for Paul, because it's for Paul Walker, because he's not with us anymore, and that was a big stepping stone, like him being gone from the franchise for me, and too fast because it's like Too Fast, Too Furious. So when you read it, you got 1, too fast, 3 for Paul, but when you read it, it says too fast for Paul, because the Dodge Charger was always too fast for Paul. I sent the logo back on like a sketch drawing on like a napkin in a restaurant. I take a picture and send it to him. He's like, bad. It's like, cool. What are you going to do with it? I was like, I'm going to take it to SEMA. He's like, cool. Let me contact Mopar and see if they endorse this as a one-off gear shift knob in the world. Mopar endorsed it. It's got Charger written down the side of it. And it just is mind-blowing. Like, you sit in it, and the car's cool, the seat's cool. You got this bright white shift knob with 2 lines with the logo on it. And it's just amazing. And then to be able to show Cody Walker what I did, him to sign the dashboard, it was kind of quite emotional for me, because I looked up to Paul Walker so much. Like, even you don't get to know the guy, you don't know him, you'll never meet him, but for what he represented as a human being, a nice guy, someone that had a young family, someone that did stuff for charity, kind of like hit home a lot for me. I think I'm a nice guy. I help out charities. He's a car guy. He's in a movie that you idolize. And for him to pass away at such a young age, it really shows you how precious life is. And I want to do something in this car. I kind of remembered him, because the only reason I'm here today is because of the love of the movies that he was in at the beginning. So, to do that shift knob is pretty cool. The dream. I built, let's call it now, the NAS Charger. Yeah? NASCAR-powered Dodge Charger, documented by Universal Studios, raced by Carl Edwards. I mean, does it get cooler than a road-going NASCAR?
So about probably 5 or 6 years ago, we had one of the most interesting experiences of my entire life. From 2010 to 2018, we operated and owned one of the largest exotic car rental businesses, or I would say legitimate businesses, in Miami. One of the most interesting calls I ever got was one night, I'm in bed, probably like 12:30 at night, and I get a phone call. It's a very large concierge in Miami. And he's like, John, I hate to bother you right now, but Justin Bieber wants to rent a Lamborghini. And at the time, Justin Bieber was probably at the height of his career. He had a bunch of big singles. He had a bunch of gossip and all these different things. He was getting into trouble, I think, at the time as well. My response was, okay, great. What is he looking for? No, he just wants his security to have something for the night. He's going to take this girl out. Okay, so I get out of bed. I call one of my employees, and I'm like, okay, we're going to go get this car. I get another call back. Can you bring over 2 cars? Now it's like 1:30 a.m. I have the cars out. We get an address, and we're told to deliver the cars to this address. And meanwhile, I'm texting back and forth with this concierge. And I'm like, well, does he have a license? Can you send me some information? What is he going to pay? What am I doing here? Is this a business transaction or what is it? And he basically texted me back and he said, hey, listen, if you give him the cars for the evening, his security is going to drive the cars. He currently does not have a license. He'll make a post on Instagram. And I forget exactly how many followers Justin Bieber had at the time, but he had a lot. I mean, it was, my guess was 10, 20, maybe even 30 million followers. I think at the time we were just sort of starting our Instagram campaigns and launching on Instagram, and we had maybe 20,000 followers or something like that. I get the address. I agree. Cool. Justin Bieber makes an Instagram post. It's cool for press. It's not the biggest thing in the world, but it's cool. And I drive the cars over to this address. Realize when I pull up, I'm actually at Little Wayne's skate park. So I pull up and there's all these, I guess you could say it like borderline thugs. I mean, you know, guys that probably aren't thugs, but because they're in the music industry, they've got like grills and no t-shirts on and their pants hanging down. So it's definitely an interesting dynamic. And I pull up in Lamborghini LP 550-2 Spider, a very cool car, pearl yellow, the Giallo yellow over black and yellow interior. So it did stand out. And the other car we brought actually was the one of 499 Ferrari 16M Scuderia Spider, which is a special car. I think we're probably the only company ever to rent one of the cars. That was where my passion sort of came into the Lulavi business, was buying this 16M. So I'm sort of sitting waiting for the cars. Now an hour goes by. It's like probably like 2 a.m., something like that. And guess who comes out? Justin Bieber. So now his entourage, everybody, and obviously, I mean, not that I was starstruck by any means. I wasn't a Justin Bieber fan. Maybe not today even, but he's a talented kid, but just not my forte. And he comes out, very nice young man. He's like, hello, thank you so much. And he takes this picture of himself in front of the car. And I realize that his head of security is actually a friend of mine. So I start talking to the head of security. He's like, don't worry, John. I'm going to take the cars. I'll take responsibility. He can't drive. He doesn't have a license. We'll handle everything. I had gone back to my house, gone to bed, and I noticed my Instagram started going crazy. So he made this tag. And it was, thank you, Lulavi, at Lulavi, for these cars. And it was a photo of him with his shirt off and, you know, his boxers hanging and stuff. It was a cool photo, you know, I mean, in pop culture context. Our Instagram exploded. I'd never seen anything like it. To this day, I mean, we ended up, Lulavi had about 100,000 followers, and I think we gained 5,000 followers in minutes. It was crazy. I sort of drift off to sleep and realize I'm awoken abruptly to my phone going crazy. Oh God, what is this? This is not normal. So I pick up the phone and it's his security and he's like, hey, John, we got a problem. My immediate reaction was like, oh my God, somebody wrecked the car, something happened. And I'm thinking, is everyone okay? And his answer is no. I'm like, uh-oh, it's not good. I said, why? What happened? He's like, Justin Bieber got arrested. And I laugh when I say it because it was like, huh? Jump in the car, I fly over there, I pull up, and literally in front of me is the yellow Gallardo, the red Ferrari 16M, and I noticed that Justin Bieber's in the car and basically being arrested, being told his rights and being removed from the car. And one of his friends was driving the 16M, still waiting in the car. So at this point, I'm watching from a distance and I see he is getting arrested, and I'm like, okay. So I go over to the cops and I maintain my composure. I'm like, hello, officer, how are you? I'm the owner of the company, blah, blah, blah. And the officer is not happy. Basically tells me in a nice way to get the hell out of here. And I tell him, sir, if you don't mind, instead of impounding the cars, I don't know what situation's going on. I'm glad no one was hurt. Do you mind if I take the cars? I mean, these are sensitive cars. They aren't cars you're going to grab on a wrecker. So he realizes that. And he looks at me and he's like, no, cars aren't going anywhere. So I'm like, whoa, okay. I try to go over to the cops again. I asked them, hey guys, do you mind? I really don't want a wrecker or flatbed picking up the cars. You could damage the cars. They're like, nope, we're taking the cars to the impound. So at this point, I'm a little ticked off. I was being very polite, and I watch as the cops get in the cars and drive the cars away. I ended up going back home. I went to bed. 7:30 rolls around. I normally wake up around 8 a.m. at this point, and my phone is exploded. I'm getting phone calls, emails, text messages, and within minutes, I realized that the entire world is talking about Justin Bieber getting arrested in a yellow Lamborghini in Miami. It must have been a drought in news at this moment because this story was everywhere, absolutely viral. I get up, I'm getting phone calls from producers, people want interviews. I mean, it was absolutely insane. So I realized I was gonna have an interesting day, to say the least. I get into the office. My first goal is to get the cars back from impound. They were sitting at an impound yard in South Beach. And really it wasn't about answering questions yet. It was about, okay, let's get the cars back to the office. Let's figure this out. Let's then assess everything. Now at this point, I'm in the office, the door's closed, and I'm just working. I'm calling our flatbed guy, Marley, and I'm like, hey, can you go send 2 flatbed? Yeah, I'll send. So I'm just processing everything. The cars get picked up and somebody calls me and they're like, hey, your cars are on the news. And I'm like, no, I know, like, you know, no, your cars are literally live on the news. So apparently there were helicopters above the impound yard filming as the flatbeds were taking out the yellow Lamborghini and red Ferrari. So literally my cars were live via satellite or whatever, leaving the impound yard, going through South Beach on the flatbeds, and literally ending up at our showroom. I stayed inside. I actually had the door locked in the showroom. I was still getting more calls. I think that day, within the first couple hours, I fielded about 80 requests for an interview. We didn't really have a big PR team. I mean, we were essentially a small company. We owned 15, 20 cars. It's not like we had a big PR team. It was me running the Instagram and our marketing. You know, at the time, I really wanted to respect his privacy. Whatever he was going through, he was actually still in jail at that moment. You know, he wasn't a client, but I wanted to let people know we respect the privacy of our clients. So I literally told all the reporters by phone and by email, listen, we are retrieving our cars now. I won't talk about the matter. I won't talk about Justin Bieber, but you guys are welcome to stop by our showroom and maybe, you know, if you want to see the cars or anything like that, that's what we can do. We can tell you about our company. That worked out incredibly well for press and media. I have to say, probably around 10 a.m., 11 a.m., I go to open our front door and there's literally 15, 20 news trucks, reporters, microphones. I mean, I felt like I was a celebrity for the day. But what was wild to me was that everyone was interested in the story. So we opened our doors, the cars arrived on the flatbeds. I mean, the helicopters were over. What was interesting was that we had GPS in all of our cars. One of the first things I did that morning was I wanted to check the GPS and I wanted to see, my God, how fast was Justin Bieber driving if he got a reckless driving charge? What was wild was the GPS showed sort of pinging the entire movements he made, and at no point did he actually even go over 40 miles per hour. So what I think potentially happened was, you know, the 16M was especially loud. I can't confirm if it was a modified exhaust or something along those lines, but I'm sure in first gear going up to 40 miles per hour, 16M was very loud. It probably sounded like a race car through residential streets. I think at certain points it could even show him doing like 25 miles per hour, 30 miles per hour. And I think by the end of the day, the very famous attorney, Roy Black, who was representing Justin at one point or a certain point, called me, and his manager, Scooter Braun, called me and asked for those records. I was happy to supply them with the records. I actually then got a call from the Florida state attorney, supplied them with those records. I said, listen, you know, these are pretty accurate, our GPS readings. I don't know exactly what happened. You know, he wasn't supposed to be driving the cars, but we did have GPS in them. So I think the reckless driving charges were dropped because of our GPS records. It's not like he was abusing the cars or anything like that. So we were happy about that at least. So imagine at that point in the Miami industry, a Lamborghini Gallardo Spider would probably get about $1,500 a day. And the Ferrari, let's say maybe a touch more because it was unique, $1,700 a day. The media impressions and the amount of backlinks and Instagram followers and all of this sort of buzz around this story, you could argue that it would have cost us maybe more than $500,000 to duplicate that. So us giving him the cars for less than $3,500 definitely paid off. You know, I'd like to say I'm a marketing genius, but could have never have planned for Justin Bieber getting arrested in Miami.
When you spend a lot of time driving cars that go really fast, there's always this curiosity of what would happen if a cop actually saw me doing this. Am I going to be pulled from the car and beaten? Am I going to get arrested? Am I going to get a ticket I can't get out of? Am I never going to be able to get insurance again? I mean, certainly we've heard stories from anywhere, including this channel, of what happens when you get a terrible speeding ticket. But at the same time, in the US, there's a lot of variation. It's not like it is in a lot of European cities where there's just traffic cameras and speed cameras, and if you do this, that happens. It's not a one-to-one correlation, so it's always a little bit of an unknown. And, you know, I used to speed a lot more than I do now. I'm not saying it's a responsible thing to do, but if you do want to go fast in a fairly reasonable way on a public road, rallies can be a really good way to do that because you're kind of insulated from some of the risk. Either you're in the back and the people in the front kind of take the brunt of whatever police attention's out there, or you're in the front and whatever you stir up might just impact the people that are behind you. And in either case, you've got some plausible deniability to say you're not the one that they're looking for. So if you want to get out there and see what your car can do, usually there are some opportunities in these kind of events to do that. And so about a month and a half ago, I was doing the Lux Rally event from Nashville to Las Vegas. And I was excited. It was kind of a long rally, 9 days. My wife was going to come with me for the first half, and a friend of mine, Tom Park, was going to come in and pick it up from Dallas. And so we got into Nashville, and, you know, they do a great job. It's a, you know, perfect food, dining experience. Everything's perfectly organized. It's kind of just an arrive, drive, and have fun kind of program. So we were really excited. My wife was excited to be going. We were driving the 430 Scuderia that I had bought because the Lamborghini didn't have air conditioning and because most of my cars are, you know, about half the time not working in their entirety. So I was excited to take the Ferrari out, even though it wasn't the most comfortable Grand Tourer for a trip like this, but it was going to be a lot of fun. And the first day went great. We led the pack. So we arrive in Memphis. We have a great dinner. We stay at a great hotel. Everything's very perfectly organized. And we head out the next morning towards Dallas. So we're out in front in a 3-car pack, and it's me and the Scud, a Porsche 911, and a Ferrari 599. And we're keeping a pretty good pace. But the thing about these rallies is, even though there's the perception from most of the people involved that everybody's constantly going these insane speeds, usually at the front, if you maintain a pace of about 90 or 100 and don't slow down, generally you're going to stay out in front of the people who kind of get bunched up or caught as people are making passing maneuvers or whatever the case may be, and then they need to go 130, 150 periodically to be able to keep their average at the same pace. I mean, very rarely is true exotic car rally pace that much even in the vicinity of Cannonball pace. And so no big deal. I had done exactly the same thing on their Miami to Mardi Gras event a few months earlier and just generally driven 90, 100 miles an hour out in front and had no issues, and everybody else is having a fun time kind of playing in the background. It was a great time. And so I'm doing the same thing in this Ferrari, and we're out in front, we're using walkie-talkies to communicate, and I've got a Valentine one, and I'm running Waze. That's all I had time to set up in this car since I bought it the day before the event, but that's usually enough for me to make pretty good time along a road trip. And you're seeing a lot of noise on the V1, but that just kind of happens now. It's a very noisy kind of spectrum of radio frequencies that radar use, and some of the newer devices reduce the number of false positives and things that you'll see, but regardless, it tends to work for me. I've been using it for 15 years. And so I see some stuff, and I see one signal that probably indicates that there's a cop pretty close. And at about that same time, Jovian, who's 2 cars back in the 599, says, "Hey guys, I think we just passed a cop going in the other direction." Now at that moment, that's not a huge bother. We're on a divided highway, 2 lanes in either direction, and there's kind of a median divider with cords and like guardrails in the middle, so he can't just spin around and come after us. So the only 2 options really are, do we go insanely fast to try to get away from whatever the threat might be, or do we just drive a little bit more prudently for the next few miles and see if he's alerted anybody up ahead? And so that's kind of what we do on a rally. That's usually the best bet. You know, you just kind of slow down, let everybody else catch up, and then you might start again in a few miles. So we do that, but right around the next bend, we see a Charger on the side of the road, and it's a police car, and he's right at the entrance to a rest area, and as he sees us, he pulls out in front of us and turns his lights on. At this point, we're going maybe high 80s, low 90s, worst worth some attention, but nothing alarming. It shouldn't be to him. And so all three of us obediently and immediately acquiesce. We pull over on the side of the road. And normal protocol for getting pulled over, turn the car off, keys on top of the dash, windows down, hands on the steering wheel. Just don't reach for anything. Don't do anything that might alarm him. But from there, things escalated rather quickly because this cop kicks his door open and jumps out of his car, gun drawn. And I'm like, whoa, 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 hands on top of the steering wheel at this point. And he's like, get out of the car. I'm like, whoa, whoa, okay. I'm unbuckling this hand here. And at this point, he's already pulling on my door handle, which doesn't unlock until I pull the inside handle. At that point, he pulls the door open, pulls me out of the car, and immediately handcuffs me. Now, keep in mind, my wife is in the passenger seat, and she's like, what's going on? I'm like, it's gonna be all right, just relax. He goes, get behind my car, goes to Matt in the Porsche behind me, handcuffs him with his spare set of handcuffs, goes back to his car, gets an extra set of handcuffs, and goes back and handcuffs Jovian. So we're all standing kind of around behind his car, and at this point the rest of the cars are kind of coming by. So about half the field went by us at a very low speed, noticing that we were all there, and the other half kind of snuck into the rest area so they could look through the trees to see what was going on, and I guess be there in case they needed to get our cars, because it didn't look like things were going all that well. And so he never says that we're under arrest, never reads us our rights, just immediately starts kind of detaining us and restraining us and just asking, what are y'all doing? And I'm like, okay, sir, sorry about this. We're just driving to Dallas with some friends. We got all these stickers. You can see it's at an event. We just left from Memphis. We're in Nashville the day before. We're not trying to hurt anybody or do anything crazy. And he's like, well, you just passed a state trooper going 111 miles an hour. Well, if you say so, but I really don't think we were going that fast. And, certainly we're not trying to. I mean, I understand that, that would be totally unacceptable, but also trust me that the car's going awful lot faster than that. So if we'd been trying to go fast, it would have been a whole lot more than 111. And I've had actually pretty good success with that line. It tends to kind of lighten the mood a little bit. But he's just heavy breathing, like super amped up. And you could tell that he had just gotten a radio call from this guy saying there's 3 exotic cars coming your way. You're just about to have a high-speed chase. And he was a young cop and, probably was really excited and, adrenaline pumping, everything in this, emotional high at what was about to happen. And then anticlimactically, we all just kind of pull over and are perfectly obedient. Now, your best strategy in any pullover, regardless of what's happening, is keep the cop talking. The more he talks, the more it humanizes you, the more he gets reassured that you're not out here as some menace to society, and it just ends up always resulting in a better outcome. Now, at this point, the cop that we'd passed has gone to an exit, circled back, and he pulls up behind us, and a couple other police cars are showing up as well, including one older cop that's in like this paratrooper uniform, this like full dark green army. Look at I don't know what it was. And he starts spouting off, hey, look at all these cool cars. Like it's like an old Cannonball. I mean, I remember these days and all this stuff, and talking about his cars and how fast he drives and all the fun he has. So I'm like, okay, we're at least moving in the right direction. But of course, we're still handcuffed here. And of course, if you're being restrained by a cop, you can always ask them, am I under arrest? And if not, they're supposed to let you go, either with a ticket or whatever. In this circumstance, we weren't going to do that because I think the answer in that circumstance would have been, oh yeah, you are, and let me read you your rights and throw you in the back of my car. So we're all just kind of talking. I explain that we do this sort of drive sometimes for charity, talk about the Cannonball Memorial Run, raising money for the families of fallen officers, and talk about our itinerary a bit, that we're just out having fun and enjoying some good cars. And most cops are car guys. We've seen and talked about that a lot here. And so when you start talking about cars, in most cases, they're ready to reciprocate that. I think he had some kind of a Mustang or something like that. And, it was all getting more and more friendly, and I can see his heart rate and respiratory rate dropping as we continue talking. Of course, Jovian and Matt don't really say much of anything. They're just kind of wide-eyed, not sure what's going on, and I do most of the talking. And so I'm still handcuffed, and I'm leaning in his car. He's typing in all of our informations. He's taken our wallets out of our back pockets or wherever they were and has gotten everything. And it's very awkward and strange, but, we're just kind of along for the ride at this point. And if he's finding out if there's any warrants or crazy tickets or anything that he needs to be worried about, and of course, there's no issues there. Everybody's insurance is valid. No alarm bells going off. And I'm talking to him, and you know, just giving him some insight about the cars and what we do and all this stuff, and just whatever I can say to keep him talking. And eventually he's like, all right, guys, I should take you to jail, but I'm not going to. I'm just going to give you the tickets. It'll be for the 111 for each of you and a reckless driving charge. And I'm like, man, we were kind of all by ourselves. Like, can it not be a reckless driving charge? Because in some states, if you're over a certain speed, they have to call it reckless driving. It's like by definition, over whatever 100 is reckless driving. But Arkansas is not one of those states. And so I'm like, all right, well, you know, I can't talk him out of it. My shrewdest of negotiations were unsuccessful. We didn't meet right smack dab in the middle at a warning and a handshake. And so it takes a little while, probably 30, 45 minutes, and the girls are all freaking out as to what's going on, but everything gets calm. Megan snaps a few pictures, and you know, eventually we're all happy and having fun. They let us out of, me and Matt out of the handcuffs. They couldn't find the key to Jovian's for a little while, so he hung out in handcuffs for a little while longer than the rest of us. But eventually they do just give us these tickets. They tell us we're going to be able to pay them online. We don't have to appear or anything, and we can just go on our way. And so that's exactly what we did. Obviously, it kind of tempered the pace a little bit for the next little while, but eventually we got into Dallas. And the first thing that I did was called the ticket clinic, because a few days before leaving on this trip, I had closed a sponsorship for Ticket Clinic to be our monthly presenting sponsor for the month of September. So eventually you'll start to see their ads, but I had told them when I signed them up, I said, hopefully I don't require your services in the next couple of weeks, because I am about to do this rally across the country and back. And what they are is a company that helps you locate a local attorney in whatever jurisdiction where you get a ticket, because you always want a local attorney with a chance that they go and play golf with the judge every Thursday, and they'll usually have a better outcome and just a friendlier negotiation than if you have a local lawyer show up. And regardless of that, you never want to just show up yourself and try to argue it, because if they see you and make you answer for whatever you did, they're just going to throw the book at you. And even if you have a license in a state where there's no reciprocity, you really don't want to pay a ticket going 111 miles an hour or a reckless driving charge, because at the end of the day, it's just going to keep you from getting insurance. Unfortunately, the only issue that's ever kept me from getting insurance was big diminished value claims in the past that weren't my fault, and some really expensive cars. And so sometimes insurance doesn't like that. So everything like that was fine, but I really did not want this to play out as a full conviction. So the guys at Ticket Clinic found me a couple different lawyers in Arkansas and got me in touch with the one they recommended as being the best, and I started talking to him. And very immediately he was like, man, this is kind of a bigger deal than I think even you understand. Apparently they've gotten a lot harsher on speeding. Arkansas was historically pretty lenient, but now a reckless driving charge apparently carried a minimum sentence of 5 days in jail. And I'm like, so you're telling me I'm going to have to go back to Arkansas to go to jail for 5 days? He's like, well, maybe. I mean, I'd like to think we can get it knocked down to like a lesser fine or a lesser circumstance, a lesser speed, and not have the reckless on there. But at this point, yeah, that's what I expect to have happen. And he said, also, there's no way they're going to let you just pay this thing online. Like that, you can't pay the fee for a crime. Reckless driving is a criminal charge, not just a citation or a fine for speeding. So he's like, that's not how this is going to go. But about 10 days later, it did show up. And at that point, he had been like, well, I'm going to enter a not guilty plea remotely, so we don't have to show up, and then they'll assign us a trial date, tell me what the prosecutor is, and then I'll start negotiating. But he's like, you know, he was going to be surprised if it showed up, and when it did, he was very surprised. And one of the guys had a Pennsylvania license. He just felt like paying it. He's like, I'm not going to worry about this. It won't come back on points, and his insurance is already very expensive, so he wasn't bothered by it. The other guy got a different attorney, and so we were both going to see what we could have happen. And in most cases, the hope is that you can kind of move it to like a non-points violation or a lower speed that doesn't transfer, whatever. In general, if you spend the money on hiring a lawyer, pumping some money into the local economy, and you're willing to pay some fines, usually they'll play ball. And so the trial date was coming up. It came and went, and he had said that he had submitted everything, so I was just like, all right, whatever. But a couple days later, I decided, you know what, I'm going to check their little online system and see what it says now. And it says, failure to appear, conviction of the misdemeanor class C or D or whatever it was for reckless driving. And I'm like, whoa, what the heck? And so I screenshot it, send it to him, and he's, furious. He's like, I sent it, I've got proof, all this stuff, it'll be okay. And I'm like, well, figure it out, dude. Like, this is not acceptable, and it's probably going to reduce our leverage for negotiation moving forward. So let's see what happens. He tells me that he's on it and that everything's going to be okay, and eventually shoots me a text, says, your license isn't suspended. I'm like, well, that's good to know. And he's like, I'm working on the rest. And so he calls me back a couple days later. He said, how you doing? I'm like, well, I'd be a whole lot better if you hadn't made me into a fugitive from justice. But he said, no, you're all right. Everything's going to be fine. I've got it knocked down. Here's your new court date. And I'll either have to go down there and appear, or hopefully we can just work it out between now and then. And so that date was a couple of days ago. And he called me afterwards. He said, all right, I was able to talk to him and I got it down to negligent operation. And I was like, well, I don't even know what that means. He said, well, it's a county ordinance violation. So it's not really even like a highway moving violation. There's no points. It doesn't transfer. Carries the same fine. Coincidentally, they're still going to get their money. But at the end of the day, it doesn't go on my driving record. No insurance will know about it. Other than this video, nobody will ever really hear another word about it. And so that's why you do these things. I mean, obviously I had to pay something for the attorney, but it paled in comparison to the increase in insurance premiums that I would have enjoyed over the coming years if I had something like that on my driving record. So I guess all's well that ends well, or at least ends okay. And we enjoyed the rest of the rally, had an absolute blast. Of course, Ticket Clinic got another very, very satisfied customer, and I was pleased to have had them available for something like this, and managed not to get into too much more trouble, but we did get pulled over 3 more times, and they involved some a little bit more successful but shrewd negotiation, and one of them was an interesting story, and we'll just have to save that for another day.
When we used to street race back when I was younger, it was on the Garden State Parkway, right by the border of New York and New Jersey. And it actually sounds perfect, right? It's like right as you cross into the border. So this is a little vestigial arm of the highway that doesn't really serve a purpose for either state to patrol. Jersey's a quarter mile that way, and New York, like, why would they come down to loop around and turn? It just doesn't make any sense to patrol there. But it was a popular street racing spot. There's the police turnaround right next to the starting line. And then the sign, the big, like, New York State Thruway, 1 mile away, was exactly like a quarter mile down the road. So it was actually perfect. You drive by there even to this day, you just see a burnout box. You see all the tire marks and everything where people still stage. And it was quiet. There's nothing really around. There's no cross traffic. So it is genuinely like a good spot to street race if you have to select a spot. And I remember I was out in my Corvette, and I was lining up to race somebody. And when you street race, like, you got people like all over the place. You're a spectacle. So you go through this like negotiation. Everybody, oh, it's $1,000 race, because everybody throws in $20. You get people that line up. There's cars all up the shoulder. It's not the safest thing. Like, you shouldn't be drag racing with cars 10 feet to your right. You have cars lining the shoulder. You got cars, like the flood of cars behind you. So you have this buffer from the actual traffic that comes along, and then the cars in the back put their flashers on. So like the traffic coming up sees them. And then you stage the race. You get somebody that comes out from a car that's right behind the two, gets out, flags it, and you're off to the races. So we come out, and then next thing you know, I see like a car coming in the opposite direction. I'm like, this could be a cop. And then he turns into the no U-turn, which is right next to me, and you see the stripe, the state police stripe on the side of the car. And you're like, whoop, that's not good. There's a mass of cars. You got 60 cars like pent up behind me. There's cars lining the shoulder that like this guy is just gonna like go and get the easier guy. But right now, the cop turns on his lights, and I was like, all right, cool, we'll just start rolling out. And then he starts coming, and I'm like, he doesn't want one of those guys, I guess. And I'm like, all right, I'm out. Because like, all I know is we just had the road shut down for 2 minutes, and I've got nothing but clear highway ahead of me. So I'm ripping, and guess who's ripping right behind me? State trooper car. So the people that are still lined up by the finish line see my vet screaming by. 8 seconds later, the cop cars, everyone's like I'm in my head, they're cheering me on. They may all be running for their lives. I'm out. Like, this guy's got to give up. Like, you should just go get somebody else. Like, I figure when I'm at 150 miles an hour, he's going to be like, all right, you know what, like, Snake Star, not an Apache, sir. And like, the more separation I have, the more deniability I have that you must be thinking of somebody else once he loses sight of me. So I come on the highway. I'm going, let's just say eastbound on 287. And sure enough, like, another cop comes, lights screaming up onto the highway. I'm like, all right, it's on now. Like, this is like full blown like O.J. Simpson stuff. Light traffic. It's like 2 or 3 in the morning. It's not early by any stretch. And there was a car in the center lane. There was a car in the right lane. And I'm going 140, 150 miles an hour and just coming up, whizzing past people. Next thing you know, the car in the center lane just dips into the left lane for no reason. And I'm doing 150 and I now have an impediment right in front of me. So here I was full brake. When I say full brake, you're talking like panic stop, trying to brake that thing into a turn. So I'm now like turning, and I remember squeaking by this guy and I was like, holy shit, why the hell there's nobody on the road, there's nobody in front of him, there was no reason. Because you look what other people would do to predict where you're gonna go. Like, all right, this guy may go around, but there was nobody in front of him. So I passed him at probably 120 or 130, like full brake, switching lanes. And then it was just back onto the accelerator after that because there was nobody in front of him. So then I took a horseshoe, got off that highway, got off another local exit. So now I'm like 3 or 4 turns away. And I went to my buddy's house, who was also there racing with me. And I left my car in his driveway and took his Lexus home. And it was just like, all right, we got away with that one. And I didn't go back to that racing spot for a minute. My car was like, it didn't have student driver in the back. It was just like a dark Corvette at that point in time. There was a bunch of Corvettes that came up. After that, I got a little Roadrunner sticker that I put on the rear window that was about as telling as I could have. But they're like, dude, for hours, they all went back to the parking lot. The cops are like looking in the trees with spotlights and everything like that. And I'm like, okay, I'll chill out for a little bit. The next like time or two that I went up, I didn't even bring the Corvette, and then it just seemed like, all right, they're over it. And now I don't recommend running from cops, but if you're gonna run from cops, I would recommend getting off the road as soon as possible, because once they lose sight of you and you can get off the road, it's your best chance of getting away. Staying on the same road allows them to come get you. Shut down the road, spike strips. Like every time you see like these police chases where they're just eternally on highways, you got to get off the highway and you got to essentially ditch the car for the most part. Even if you do get arrested, you can't prove who was driving. You can't prove it was the same car because they lost sight of it. So now maybe with modern day technology, they'll be able to enhance traffic cameras and everything and be like, this is you right here. Another time when I successfully evaded was my buddy Emil got a GT3, a 997 GT3. And he's like, I'm going to come over and show you my new car. I was like, all right, cool. So my Corvette was parked outside. And he's like, yeah, come on down. I come down, and he's like in the passenger seat with the door open and the driver's seat's like wide open. I'm like, I like where this is going. And I'm like, oh, Danny, I'm going out and my buddy Danny lived in the building. I'm going out in Emil's car. You want to like come out with us? He didn't have anything. I'm like, yeah, drive my vet. Like, he's one of the few people I would let drive my vet. And there's this like bus stop underneath an overpass there. And I like start to get on the throttle, but I see like a cop coming off behind us. I start to get on the throttle like, oh, cop, but Danny doesn't see him. And he's in my vet, which was supercharged and loud as shit at the time. And like under the tunnel, I'm like, oh, not good. Cops' lights go on. I'm like, all right, let me just get out of here and I'll let him deal with that, because like I don't want to be involved in that stuff. So like I start picking up speed to like get some distance between me and him, thinking he's going to get pulled over, and the cop, if he can get in front of both of us, will pull us both over. But if I can get enough distance, he's just going to take him. And Danny's just like, oh, we're speeding up. So he just like starts following me. I'm like, oh, shit, I guess we're out. So I'm just jumping highway to highway to highway, no, 80 and then 17, and I'm ripping through, and I just see Danny behind me. I'm like, all right, this is happening right now. Like, the two of us, we're like Smokey and the Bandit. You weren't expecting a police chase in the first like day of ownership of your GT3, but like it's happening. I end up looking in my rearview mirror, and cloud of smoke comes out of my Corvette, and I'm like, whoa, sucks to be him. And it just like smoke pouring out, and I'm like, that sucks. So I get off, I pull behind like a Home Depot, and I'm like, oh shit, like Danny's screwed. Like he's gonna be like evading, locked up, whatever, because like the car just broke. And sure enough, he like pulls in behind me. I'm like, what are you doing? Like the belt snapped on the supercharger and like broke off an oil line. So it was just like a big plume of white smoke all over the place. I'm like, turn the car off. I'm like, Jesus Christ. And he's like, oh, it's like, well, why are you driving so fast? I'm like, you didn't see the cop? And he didn't even see the cop. He's like, no. I'm like, dude, we were just running from the police. My vet broke while running from the cops. We both ended up getting away. We dipped behind Home Depot. I came with a tow truck and pulled my car, or trailer, and pulled my car out of there. But it was an adventurous story. It was a lot of fun. But then there's times where you think you should run, but you shouldn't. And one of those times was when we were on the bull run, same Danny, but he was in his Corvette at the time. He bought a Mallet C6 supercharged Corvette, which was quite fast. He and I were racing. We were going from Lake Havasu to San Diego. There's nowhere to go. He's like, hey, we've been cruising at 200. I'm like, all right, let's do 200. So I brought it up to like 180 or 190, and I was waiting for him to come by to see that his Corvette can go over 200 miles an hour. And we were at this for like a while, just playing around on the highway, 150 and plus for a long time. And sure enough, we come up on like a cop, and I'm like, ooh, yeah, that's not good. So we just keep going because like, what are you gonna do? And then we see another cop up in the median, and we like slow way down. We're like, oh, like, what are we gonna do now? Like, they're gonna shut down the road. So we accept our fate. Cop comes behind us, lights on, and I was a little bit of a dick because he came behind me first, and I'm like, you know what, maybe we could like talk our way out of it. So like sort of brake checked him when he was like pulling me over, and he like drove into the dirt to avoid hitting the Ford GT. And we're like, oh, we're totally going to jail. Like 194 miles an hour. And it was just like, and luckily I think what saved us here that we got away with only a ticket is that we were going to be on the same road for a while. And the other cop that we passed was so far back that it may have been different jurisdictions or something like that. So that guy didn't come to go deal with us because it may have been, maybe there was another call, maybe his shift was over. Like something happened that this guy could only write us on what he saw. So we had a police scanner in the car. And when he walked up to the window, Noah had the camera in his face. So he's like, can I help you with something? And I'm like, okay, that's about what I expected. It's better than a gun. There's no conversation at this point in time. The guy was annoyed as shit. And he went back to his car, and we hear on the scanner, we didn't get the inbound. We only got the outbound scanner traffic. I don't know why. But effectively, we heard him reading our licenses. We heard him like reading everything. And when we heard the phrase, they were code blue when I saw them, we didn't know what that meant. But we assumed that like, all right, code blue, that's either good or bad. And he's like, but we'll get them down the road because they're on their way to San Diego and they're racing. We're like, all right, we are in the clear. And that was like one of the hugest weights lifted off our shoulder. We were like, I'm like, here, take my wallet. You got the bail money here. Like we were like implementing like emergency action plan, thinking that we were on a one-way trip to jail. And luckily we got away with it. So that was a fun one.
My C63, it's a 2009, and it's white on black, which is the combo I wanted. Some people think it's common, but I really like it. I wanted to get into a newer generation of Mercedes AMG cars on my channel. I'd been focusing on, mid 2000s, basically the same style engine and transmission and stuff, and I love them. They're bulletproof. And I know from working at the dealership for 10 years that those are just so solid, and I knew them like the back of my hand. But the evolution of my channel requires me to move along. So my next newer but super cheap AMG cars had to have an engine called the M156, which is just its fancy designation. It's the naturally aspirated 63 engine, although it's really a 6.2 liter. These engines had some problems. And before I released my 2009 C63, I actually released a video. I forget what it's titled, but it's something along the lines of, this was the least reliable AMG engine ever built. And it was a bold claim, and it had taken me a little bit of time to figure out if I could, publicly release that claim. But after years of seeing these engines break at the dealer, and then after I left in 2012, hearing the horror stories from my dealership tech friends at Mercedes as they aged, I was like, yeah, this is the least reliable AMG engine ever built, period. So I came out with this video I highlighted 5 things wrong with the engine. There were more. I just didn't want to make it too long. And, I wanted to buy one of these cars that had a very specific engine problem because I wanted to fix it on my channel. That's what I do. I buy cars that need work, I fix them, and some of them get a little instructional, and I figured this would be interesting to show people how to do because it is something they can do at home. There'd been a pretty famous car with this engine where the guy rebuilt it at home because the dealer quoted him like $50,000 or something. And it was an R63. It was very rare. One year, there's like 50 of them in the States. So this guy did all the engine work at home. It was amazing. And I'm like, this is totally something people can do to a certain extent with the top end. So I finally, after months, I found a C63 AMG that was listed specifically with the engine problem that I wanted, which was bad head bolts, which would then blow the head gaskets. Obviously, you're taking the heads off. And then at that point, they also had issues with the lifters and the cams. So I was going to just show it all, over, maybe a 3-part series or something like that. So I find this car. I call the guys in Kentucky, 5 hours away from Chicago, where I live. And I get him on the phone and I'm like, can you explain to me the problem? It seemed weird, but I wanted to make sure his engine was bad, but in a totally opposite reason that most people are like asking those types of questions. They're asking to find out, is it bad? I wanted to make sure that it was definitely bad and not misdiagnosed, because I really wanted a car to have this bad engine. So as he's talking to me, I'm like, this is hit or miss. Like, I don't know if he's diagnosed this right, but I'm going to assume he's priced this thing $6 or $7 grand less than what it would go for, that he's at least had it diagnosed at a shop. Okay. So I'm like, I'm going to go buy this car. It was priced really well. So I'm like, worst case scenario, and the engine is good, whatever. Okay. I got a cool car. I'll start modifying it right off the bat. So I get to Kentucky. It's like 10 o'clock at night. And I'm looking at this. I started up and it's cold. Got my hands on the engine. It's totally cold. Like I asked him, I'm like, I won't buy the car if you start it up and warm it up before I get there. I hate when people do that. You gotta check these things out when they're cold. There can be so many issues that can be masked by warming up an engine, smoke and noises and whatnot. So totally cold. It was 40 degrees out. I started up and this thing is perfect. And no smoke coming out of the exhaust pipe. That was his big thing. He's like, when you start it up, smoke will blow out of the tailpipe and then it'll clear up. It's got a low coolant light, and when the head bolts broke, coolant would get sucked into the combustion chamber, and that was kind of your first sign that you had this issue. So it didn't have that. It ran great. And then one of the other, many other issues had to do with rattling from the engine. It could be one of like 3 different things, but all very expensive and interesting to fix. So it didn't have that either. This thing starts up perfect, no noises at all. We go for a ride, transmission perfect, shifts great, no howling from the rear end. Mechanically, I'm like, this is awesome. It's got a really bad tire, the alignment's off, and it's just kind of hacked up. It's a rebuilt title car that was fixed 3 years ago, is hitting the rear quarter. I could tell they didn't do the best job. The body lines weren't really the best and whatever, but for $8,500, it was a 68,000 mile C63. You can't touch it. I was just about to buy a smashed one at auction for 13. So like these things still hold, they're still worth more, 22, 23,000 for this car with a clean title. I'm still thinking there's something wrong with this engine, because he did say sometimes it wouldn't smoke. So I ended up making the deal. I buy the car and I drive it home, even though he told me it had to be towed. This is how bad he thought this engine was. He's like, you got to get this thing towed. And after running, I'm like, no, I called off the truck. I had a truck like lined up for this. Called him off and I drove it home. I had a friend with me. We actually picked up another car at the same time. So we bought that one first, then drove to Kentucky, bought this one. Drove home from Chicago. The first half hour, my wife's calling me, hey, how's the trip going? Babe, I can't talk. Leave me alone. I gotta concentrate because this car's gonna blow up. I'm like, I have no idea what's wrong with it and I'm freaked out, So I'm like, I really need to concentrate on driving right now. An hour later, I'm calling her up. I'm like, babe, this car is awesome. I'm jamming out. It's got a great stereo. It's running great. It sounds ridiculous. It's straight piped and stuff, but that engine just sounds amazing. So I'm driving this car. I drove it home 5 hours. I didn't even have to top it up with coolant. I did nothing. I just pulled over probably 4 times to check everything over. Everything was great. Didn't need a tool. Didn't need any fluids at all. So I get home and I'm trying to come up with a game plan. Like, what am I going to do with this thing now? Like, I really did think something was going to be wrong with it. I ended up finding it had a coolant leak, and I traced that back to the thermostat housing. It had a little nipple on there that broke off. So then I'm like, wow, this guy, unfortunately, was a nice guy. He probably just Googled C63 and coolant light. And when you do that, everybody on the internet says your head bolts are bad. That's it. So he probably freaked himself out, head bolts, and he put it in the ad. As he said, it probably needs head bolts and head gaskets. That's why it's cheap, whatever. So I replaced the thermostat housing in my driveway, half hour, $100, no more coolant leak. That's it. I mean, this engine is perfect. Now, I did a couple other little things. I did do a power steering pump, an air conditioning line, and some bushings, whatever. No big deal, but I sorted this car out just for, a few $100 and just a little bit of my time in the garage, and mechanically, it's in excellent condition now. I put probably a couple thousand miles on it and no sign of white smoke or anything. So this guy's definitely probably seen these videos, and I do, I feel a little bit bad about it, but, what are you going to do? So now the C63 is at a body shop, and I'm not going to say this is karma coming back to get me, although a lot of people mentioned this in the video I released where we take the bumpers off to kind of look at the quality of work that was done by the body shop that rebuilt it after it was sold at auction. Because I suspected they did not do a good job. The gaps, and there were so many signs and everything. And that was after seeing that when I initially was looking to buy the car, I'm like, this is going to give me a great opportunity to show people what to look out for. And that not, sometimes you see these cars, especially in pictures on the internet, and it's like, oh, that looks great. Oh yeah, I'm going to save like 10 grand on rebuild title. Great. But if this is a car that you really want to keep forever and you want it to be nice and pristine or whatever, some of these shops just hack them up. They hack them up. They slap the bumpers on. They just get them to fit, and the whole car could be twisted, whatever. And some states, the inspection is nothing. It's like, is your windshield cracked? No. Okay, you're good. So this car, we took the bumpers off, and where it was hitting the rear quarter was still kind of like smushed in. And then we go to the front end, and you could tell like there was a frame rail extension that's replaced. It was swayed a little bit, and there were some other signs here and there, overspray and whatnot. But overall, even with all of that considered, now I'm fixing it up on the cheap. We're not gonna like go replace the quarter panel and go nuts. It's always gonna have a rebuilt title. But even with that, even after I spent a couple grand on the body work and whatnot, it's still like a roughly 10 or 11,000. We'll see what it ends up, once we're fully done, for this car that mechanically is perfect. So at the end of the day, it was an amazing deal, and it definitely taught me a lot, especially once I knew we were going to find some damage, but I didn't know how bad they would let these things go. And it's nothing that affects the safety of the car, but it's like, you could have just spent a little bit more time on this and made it really nice, So, but the engine has been perfect, and now we're moving along to modifications. So we're gonna start off with the exhaust, and we're actually gonna demodify the exhaust. So the guy straight piped it. It still has the front catalytic converters, and that's it. And then he went to like Midas or something, some regular exhaust shop, and it's got some rusty old pipes on an AMG car, and it had blue flame tips coming out the back. It was horrible. I actually attempted to crush them in one of my videos in a hydraulic press. But this thing also had a bunch of racing stickers on them and stuff like that. So I've demodded all that. It looks like a normal C63. I found the factory mufflers, which are insanely expensive. They sell for like $800-900. I found them for $450 from a guy who saw my video, liked how it sounded with straight pipes, and decided to lop them off, duplicate what I hated, and then sell me these mufflers. So it was a great deal. He loves the way his car sounds, so it's a win-win. But putting the mufflers on, then we have long tube headers. I've converted it to flex fuel, so it runs E85 now, or any mix of ethanol and gasoline. And then we're gonna just do some regular bolt-ons. It's naturally aspirated, so it's kind of hard to get power out of it without spending $10,000 on a supercharger. So yeah, we're just gonna have some fun. It's getting wheels, getting wrapped. My advice to someone that wants a car with a 63 motor is you better love the power delivery and the sound, because if you don't, you probably don't want the hassles that go along with it. So a lot of people are very particular where they're M156 63 motor fanatics because it revs really nicely. It feels amazing. It's a wonderful race engine. It's a flat tappet design engine that was really derived. You could tell it was built with racing in mind. So it's great from that if you can appreciate that. But if you're just looking for a cool AMG car to tool around town, they can add up. I mean, even the later ones, there were a lot of things they didn't fix, ever. The head bolts they did, but so it's finicky. It's not like the generation of AMG cars before where you could just like change the oil every whenever and they kept on going. These things are very finicky, and Mercedes kept with the 10,000 mile interval, which is crazy to me for that engine. So I would say love the car first and then accept its flaws second.
Hi, I'm Brock Yates Jr. My father invented the Cannonball in 1971, and I was on the first one with him, Jim Williams, Steve Smith, where we set the record in 40 hours and 51 minutes. Later that same year, Brock and Dan Gurney reset the record. And now, after many other attempts, we have a new record. Congratulations to Doug and Arnie. Great job. Don't know how you did it. Good God, I don't know how you did it.
In 75, Jack May and Rick Klein improved the record to 35 hours, 53 minutes.
I'm David Yarborough. In 1979, Dave Hines and I set the record at 32 hours and 51 minutes in the fifth and final Cannonball run. Congratulations, Doug and Arnie.
In 1983, David Deem and Doug Turner set the record. In 2006, Alex Roy and I broke that record. In 2007, we announced the news. Congratulations to Doug and Arnie. Well done, boys.
Hey, Doug and Arnie, congrats on setting the Cannonball record. That is an insane achievement, and I know how hard it is. Richard and I did it in 2007. Enjoy it.
I'm David Black, and in 2013, I set the Cannonball record with Ed Bowling and Dan Wong.
Congratulations, Arnie and Doug.
To me, cannonballing is the ultimate expression of freedom. And it's something that, as a kid, I saw the movie, I read the articles, and it was something that just was forever in my mind, which it really didn't come back until 2006 when, with AMS, we had gone and done the One Lap of America, which is the event that Brock Yates kind of turned Cannonball into once he stopped doing the cross-country runs. And he actually sent out a application for an underground one last Cannonball, and the guys brought it back, and they're like, oh, you like Cannonball stuff, check this out. And I was just beside myself. Like, here is an application to do a Cannonball. I immediately filled it out, picked my team members, picked out a vehicle that I was going to do it in, sent in the application, and never heard anything. Well, that's because Brock probably had a better idea of not doing it. So it actually never happened. But then after that, in 2007, Alex Roy comes out that he had broken the record, and the movie 32 Hours, 7 Minutes comes out. And now I am just fiending for any amount of content about Cannonball that I can find, but there really just isn't any. And in 2013, Ed broke the record, 28 hours and 50 minutes, 98 miles an hour across the whole country. And I was both excited and gutted because I was going to hear more about Cannonball. Someone else has done it, hear about the car, hear about the strategy, but gutted in the fact that, like, how do you beat that? It's pretty much unbeatable at that point.
Don't just meet your heroes, beat your heroes. So that was what I set out to do. I wanted to best Alex and Ed and the Daves and drive faster than them across country, but it was a long journey to get there. After having done the C2C race and learning kind of how to do Cannonball and what it really took to do a race, and doing it with my first team, Matt and Donadell, without whom I would not have gotten to this point, I learned what it really took to beat a record. And in that time frame, Ed asked me to come down along with his friend Arnie Toman to film some stories at his cold, loud warehouse studio, the early days of VinWiki. And I was like, man, who is this Arnie guy? And so I Facebook stalked him and read this article about him winning the 2904. And I see all these pictures of him in shake and bake outfits with this Lamborghini and Bluesmobile and Bandit Trans Am and all these different crazy cars. I'm in costumes. I'm this guy is either the coolest guy ever or just a giant tool that's full of himself. Thankfully, the former was true. I quickly found a bond with him, and we started talking all things Cannonball. And it became apparent that he was probably the greatest contender to my dreams of breaking any record. So I thought, well, if you can't beat him, join him.
So the car I chose was a 2015 Mercedes-Benz E63 AMG. And the reason I chose this car is, of course, the performance, the braking, the handling of the car, but also that the car can be kind of disguised into something that looks like every other silver vehicle out there on the road. Clearly, Ed was onto something choosing an AMG. For the fuel cell, we ended up with a 45-gallon capacity coupled with the 21-gallon factory tank. So we looked at Alex's design, Ed's design, everything we had seen in the 2904 and C2C Express, and came up with the best possible fuel transfer system we could.
Most people think that the way to break a record is to stop for fuel as little as possible. And while I agree, my strategy is more to be stopped as little as possible. So I pushed Arnie hard for a 4-stop plan, even though that seemed counterintuitive, but we had
gotten our stops in my Monte Carlo down to about 4.5 minutes, and they were very well orchestrated.
So the car was outfitted with Alpha 9 package. I'm the former VP and co-founder of AMS. I figured it was fitting that I use their parts. I know that they can be trusted and they're reliable, but the car was detuned down to 700 wheel horsepower just for safety's sake. But I figured that was plenty enough to get the job done. As far as countermeasures go, we went with the AL Priority laser jammer, net radar, radar detector, Passport Max 360, had a police scanner, CB radio, plane crash avoidance system, and brake and tail light kill switches. Something new though that we're trying is a thermal scope mounted on a gimbal on the roof. And this has never been done before, and I'm guessing I found out why, because it's really sort of temperamental and requires a lot of babysitting to kind of make it work. Even if you gave me $500,000, I would still go the exact route that I did. Simply, you can't get a better car for this type of thing, in my opinion. And I think we went out and proved that.
With me as Arnie's co-driver, the debate was on for the third man, because you got to have a good spotter to make this all work.
So basically, getting roped into Cannonball was not by choice to start out with, though it was a pleasure. A little while back, a few months ago, Doug gave me a call saying basically, hey, I'm going on a rally and I need a spotter, and I was wondering if you wanted to come, and it's tomorrow, and it's for a week. And I was like, sure, count me in. Sounds good. A few months later, Doug called me up again and said, hey, I've got a proposition for you. We're doing a C2C run in a Monte Carlo, and I was wondering if you wanted a spot. And I've got be our third, first being Doug and Arnie being the second. I said, of course, I'm in, happy to help any way I can. So I hopped in the car and did some spotting there and made some good time, and then unfortunately broke down in Colorado, but kind of got a feel for what it's like being in the car for 15 hours at that point. But as the day neared and we started to really get into the nitty-gritty of learning all the police and learning all the locations and all that, I really had a great time just figuring it all out. And Doug was really instrumental in helping me learn all this stuff, and Arnie built an insanely amazing car that handled way better than I could have ever imagined.
In 2019 on the C2C, we took the same route we were planning to take, and I shrewdly negotiated a bunch of teammates / competitors into running the same route with us, and so that I could use them for reconnaissance. And they were very helpful in that regard. One of my friends, Dan Doucette, programmed the scanners for us and did a lot of research on weather. So there's a lot of people involved that really helped us out, without which we couldn't do this. The other aspect of planning was assembling a good team of spotters that were Cannonball friendly and also qualified. Both Arnie and I had friends in numerous regions of the country, thanks to our respective businesses. So we were able to assemble a team of probably about 20 spotters across the country. And some spots like Ohio and Illinois and Colorado, we just had covered almost end to end, and it worked out really, really well. There's so many variables. Most of them you can't control. You can't control how many police are happening to patrol, or whether or not they're hiding with their radar on or off, or things like that. So you have to focus on the variables that you can control, like weather. As silly as that sounds, weather was one of the things we could sort of predict at least a few days in advance. It literally came down to about 2 days before that we had planned to take the southern route, and the weather turned in our favor on the northern route. So we decided to take that, as that was our original preferred route based on all of our research, and it worked out beautifully. Not a single drop of rain on the whole drive. So the drive itself was not without adventure. Once we got on the road, it was just go time. We made incredible time across the eastern third of the drive. And we encountered a variable that we hadn't planned for, and that was deer. And I guess Arnie and I are both not hunters, because that didn't even cross our minds that it was hunting season. I think we saw probably 50 deer dead on the highway during our drive.
So Doug did an amazing job on the first 500 miles of the run. We had a great average speed, and we got to our first fuel stop. And I ran into a situation that had not occurred on a Cannonball before, where we ran into the bathroom, came back out, and I was removing the thermal camera, and I had to open up the rear passenger door, and I knocked the gas pump out of the car. Well, it kept pumping, and it pumped gas all over my right foot. So it looked like I was going to be doing the rest of the Cannonball with one shoe.
So, Arnie always makes fun of me for packing too heavy for Cannonball trips, and he was making fun of me for taking 2 pairs of shoes on the last run. But, I always have to carry an extra pair of shoes just in case, we roll through a good neighborhood. And, he wasn't making fun of me after he spilled fuel on his shoe. No, wasn't making fun of me then. Ohio was amazing. We had about 5 different spotters, and the best thing I ever did was put them all in a group text. So they started getting competitive about how fast they were going to go and how far they were going to lead us. They went out and bought CB radios and radar detectors, and it was like we had a mini Cannonball almost on our hands through Ohio. We were pretty much free of any law enforcement intervention. We did have one scare in Ohio, and a cop was sitting in the median looking the other way, and we rolled by him at triple digits, and thankfully he was looking the other way.
So one of the things you run into on a Cannonball is you have to be kind of aware of who you're running up on. And in one of the Midwestern states on my shift, I came up pretty hot behind a Dodge Charger. We identified it as a Charger, and I had to creep up to it, and sure enough, it was a state trooper. So we were stuck behind him for a while. Thankfully, he got off the highway. Luckily, we were paying attention because he got right back on, because I'm sure he wanted to see what we were all about. So he ended up pacing us for a while and probably cost us about 20 minutes or so before he decided to turn off.
The crazy thing is, on our drive across country, somebody did get pulled over for 130 miles an hour, but it wasn't us. It was one of our spotters. And it wasn't even while they were spotting for us. It was while they were en route to Dan's house to meet up for the spotting. And they were doing 130 in my hometown, actually. And they talked their way out of the ticket by pretending that the car was acting up. And it was a Ferrari, so that was believable. Then in, I think it was Iowa, we got called in, and Arnie's disguise of the car paid off because we hear over the scanner, we have reports of a silver passenger car westbound at high rate of speed. And I'm like, passenger car. I have no idea what it is. So that certainly helped.
So what I did was I covered all of the carbon fiber trim, parts of the taillights with silver vinyl. I painted the red calipers gray and took all the emblems and stuff off, so you really can't tell what it is. And what I ended up with is, from the back, the thing looks like a 2000s Accord.
Now, our average speed to the Mississippi, we'll say, was absolutely phenomenal. And everybody in history that has never done Cannonball thinks that you can just keep that up the whole way, or you make up all your time in the western half of the U.S. And everybody that has done Cannonball says you have to make up all your time in the eastern part of it. That certainly is true. You bank all your time in the first 1,000 miles of the drive, and then you just watch it wither away, watch your average speed dwindle down the rest of the drive. We had one little incident in one of the Midwestern states, and we spotted a cop a little bit too late, and he instant on radared us. And I don't know how fast we were going, but I think it was around 120. We're just look in the rearview mirror, waiting for him to come through the median, and never came. So we're like, okay, let's go. Arnie's like, man, are you going to run? I'm like, I'm not running. He didn't come through the median. So we called our spotter who we had just passed and asked him if he had seen a cop come back westbound. He goes, no, I'm at the gas station. He's next to me. His radio's going crazy, though. So shortly after that, we saw another state trooper come like flying through the median and kind of set up to look our way. But we did the Alex Roy kind of unintentionally. We were tucked in behind a tractor trailer as we passed him, and so he didn't even see us. You know, I don't know if he was actually looking for us, but it certainly makes a good story that he was setting up to catch us, you know, and we snuck by.
So I knew Nebraska was going to be a tough state. They use a lot of instant on radar. So I called up my buddy Kyle Loftus of 1320 fame, and he just went above and beyond. He hooked me up with someone in every major city. We had 5 spotters, and he actually had a sign made for the back of his truck that said 2850 or bust. And it was great to have him out on the road and all of his friends, and they were able to kind of save us some trouble along the way. For our third fuel stop in Denver, we had a pit crew in the form of my friend Schiller from I Crave Boost. And he was there at our gas stop and realized that the pumps were actually shut down, so he was able to scout out an alternative, which was on the other side of the highway. But as we pulled up, he had both fuel nozzles in hand and ready to go. And it was a huge help to just be able to run out, use the bathroom. He gave us water, and I was able to get the thermal camera set back up for the night shift.
Overall, it was an incredibly emotional journey. So even getting to the Cannonball was very emotional. I had 2 breakdowns in the Monte Carlo in separate cannonballs, so I just didn't finish, or I guess one we finished in a rental car. Even building a car and getting to the start line is an incredibly difficult journey, fraught with financial peril. And even the win I had in 2018, we were broken down probably 3 different times, and we finished without one exhaust and, you know, no AC and just waiting for something else to break, and somehow we rolled in, but it was, you know, not without extreme emotion. This drive was kind of the culmination of that, you know, of a lot of things that I've tried to accomplish in my life, where I set out to be the best at something. You know, it's like I'm moderately good. I'm a big fish in a small pond, we'll say, at a lot of different things, but have never excelled at one. And that's always bothered me. And so this was kind of that chance to go after something that I could say, I am one of the best ever at this. The tough thing is it can be taken away from you at any time by something outside of your control. We almost experienced that in Colorado. The car just started bucking uncontrollably, losing power. And the same feelings came right back to me of what had happened with the Monty 3 different times. And I'm like, all right, we're done. I texted my wife, I texted Ed, and, you know, we're just like, all right, we rolled off an exit, shut it down, and I'm like, okay, we got to find some way home for us from middle of nowhere, Colorado. And Arnie shut the car down, started it back up again, everything was fine. And we kept going. And it turns out that it was all due to 91 octane, and the car was tuned for 93, but that was not available at our last gas stop. And so the ignition was detonating, and we were not running on full power. So Arnie said he'd take it easy. What that meant was, I'll quote Dan Gurney, at no point did we then exceed 175 miles an hour. That was his definition of taking it easy.
So when we entered California, we had our friend Carl Reese, who was the former Cannonball motorcycle record holder, who was going to meet us out in Barstow and kind of lead us into LA, because at the end of this, you're getting kind of tired, and it's just nice to have someone in front of you so you don't have to make decisions on what road you're taking and everything. But he was so early, he decided to come on out to near the border of Baker, and he was just going to run us between Baker and Barstow on his BMW motorcycle. Now, what's interesting about this motorcycle is he's got these crazy, like, high beam lights, and he's on the phone on his headset, and he says, okay, I'm just going to run in front of you, and I'm going to flash people out of the left lane so we can just kind of pass through, which is kind of a dicey proposition, because, you know, this is kind of wreaking a little bit of havoc. And, you know, I could see someone, you know, calling in this motorcycle flashing lights and this silver passenger car, you know, with antennas flying in behind. And You know, some of the time it worked. It got some people out of the way, but other times people are just parked in the left lane.
We got off the exit to Redondo Beach and just pretty much got green lights all the way there. We pulled in without any fanfare whatsoever. 27 hours, 25 minutes.
We didn't quite hit the goal that I wanted. I was hoping to get in the high 26 hours, but I thought that it was really cool that we were able to break that 100-mile-an-hour overall average barrier. And what we ended up with was 103.1 miles per hour for 2,825 miles.
Congrats, Arnie. Congrats, Doug. It's a massive achievement. You've beaten 2850. I wish I had done it, but I will have to go back.
Arnie, Doug, you guys are legends. What an amazing drive. The perfect mix of talent, luck, the right people, the right machine, and the right time.
Arnie, Doug, congratulations. That was a great effort.
Well, I wish I was there right now to congratulate you personally, but congratulations, Arnie and Doug, for beating a record that most of us didn't think could be beaten.
First, I want to say to Ed Boldian, my condolences. But records were made to be broken. So, my hearty congratulations to Arnie and Doug on a tremendous feat of endurance and efficiency and maybe a wee bit of speed. But remember, records were made to be broken. Huh? We're coming for you.
So those are our top 10 car stories from 2019. Thank you so much for watching. Thank you for everything that you've done to support VinWiki this year. We wish you all a very safe, happy, and prosperous new year, and we hope that you're around somebody special to celebrate tonight. So without any further ado, 10, 9, 8, 7, 6, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. Happy New Year. We hope 2020 is an amazing year. Thank you so much for watching, subscribing, and supporting VinWiki. We love you all very much and wish you the very best.